is that on? That's on. Welcome to the good folk of Crestbrook who've come to join us to demonstrate their concern about various planning enforcement matters in their parish. I have, and I'll put this on the public record, undertaken that there will be a report on that to the April meeting of the Planning Committee, when there will be an opportunity to make representations to members if that is necessary at the time. I have apologies from Councillor Jean Warmby. I don't think I've received any others. So we'll go on to the first item on the agenda, which is the roll call of members present.
Thank you, Chair. I'll call out each member's name if you can confirm you're here and let me know if you have any declarations of interest. Councillor Brady.
Well, I'm here. Declarations of interest. Can I deal with item 6 first? The agent, Miss Stevenson, lives in Chelmorton, and she's somebody who I do know and have met occasionally, but we've not in any way discussed this application with her or had any discussion about it. Agenda item 7, which is the property in Tissington. Longer-standing members of the committee will have been acquainted with Chris Carr, who is speaking on behalf of the applicant, who was a member of this committee until 4 years ago, actually, as it turns out. I have occasionally met Sir Richard Fitzherbert, who is making a representation. And then item 8, Mr. Jim Mundy is speaking, and he is somebody who acted for me on a planning application of my own about 6 years ago, but I haven't seen him for a very long time. But I am acquainted with him.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Armitage.
Oh, I'm sorry. Could I just add in? There's items 10 to 16. They're all National Park Authority applications. Members do not need to repeat that as we go round, and certainly not one by one.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Armitage.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm here. No declarations of interest.
Councillor Chaplin.
Good morning, and like the Chair, I also know, or certainly sat alongside Chris Carr when he was a member of this committee.
Councillor Chapman.
This is uncanny because mine almost exactly mirrors Patrick's. Item 6, I'm a near neighbour of the of Forget-Me-Not Cottage. I have discussed it in the past with one of the applicants, so I feel I ought to withdraw for that one. Tissington, I'm also a fellow Derbyshire Dales District Councillor with Richard Fitzherbert. And what was the Carver one?
Jim Mundy.
Oh yeah, he's also done work for us in the past. Thank you.
Okay. Miss Harling.
She's not here at the moment.
Councillor Hart.
Present, and declaration that I have served alongside Chris Carr in the past. No other declarations.
Councillor Huddleston.
Here, I've received an email for agenda item 5.
Councillor McCloy.
Present, email item number 5 and the same for 7, Chris Carr and Richard Fitzherbert.
Councillor Murphy.
Present and no interest.
Councillor Potter.
7, because I know Chris Carr as a previous member to this authority on 2 occasions, I think. 10 to 16, they are National Park applications. And number 8, Carver is one of my parish councils, but I never stay into planning.
Councillor Priestley.
Present, and I also received email regarding item number 5.
Councillor Richardson.
President, there are no declarations and not reply on email.
Mr Smith.
Present, received an email from the agent, agenda item 5, and Chris Carr and Sir Richard Fitzherbert are known to me.
That completes the roll call.
Could I just have clarification, because 2 or 3 of you have received emails in relation to item 5. Is that since the last meeting? Okay, that's all right. Because I think we all of us received emails before the previous meeting. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of January. I'm happy to move those from the... Oh, it's been moved, I'll second it. Has anybody got any comments on the accuracy of the minutes? In that case, all those in favour of adopting the minutes? Anyone against? No, that's unanimous, thank you. And we have no urgent business. What?
No, Chair,
No. And we will now proceed to agenda item 5, which is Middle Hay, Long Lane, Cressbrook, which came to us at a previous meeting and we sent off for further and better information. Who's your... Okay.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application by Natural England for a new general purpose agricultural building under the General Permitted Development Order, where such developments can be permitted development subject to an assessment of siting, design and external appearance. Owing to the impact of these matters in this case, officers determined that prior approval was required. As the Chair's mentioned, the application was deferred from the last committee with a request for more information on available and suitable alternative sites within the vicinity. And the amended report before you makes that assessment and concludes that there is no overriding reason why 2 of the alternative sites could not accommodate a building to serve the needs of the holding. The proposed building, by virtue of its location, size and design, would cause considerable harm to the landscape character of the area and is recommended for refusal. Some members may not have been present at the previous meeting, so I will just outline the proposals again to you. So you can see the application site here edged red. This is, directly to the north of the site, about 170 metres to the north of the site. Here is a small dilapidated stone building. To the west is Cressbrook Dale and Millersdale. The B6465, sorry, which is the road between Wardlow and Monsell Head, runs to the east of the site, and then a minor road branches off down into Cressbrook Dale. So the village of Cressbrook is down here to the south, and Wardlow Haycop is here to the north, and this is the access track that leads down to the minor road. This slide shows the various rights of way in the area. So what's quite crucial is that all of the land between the road and Cressbrook Dale, so all around the application site, and to the north around Wardlow Haycop is open access land where the public have a right to roam. There's also a network of public footpaths here on the ground to the east coming off Longston Moor. And the views across the landscape here are expansive and panoramic. The site sits within the Derbyshire Dales National Nature Reserve, which is managed by National England, primarily for the purposes of maintaining and protecting its biodiversity. And the land's grazed by a herd of belted Galloway cattle. There are there's like a collection of cattle pens and a fence corral just to the north of the site here. So this is the block plan of the building. It would be used for the storage of fodder and equipment and animal housing and welfare facilities. It would be 31.5 metres long by 10 metres wide. And you can, why does that keep happening? You can see the access track here, just heading off to the east, down to the road. So this is the floor plan of the building. It would be open along this elevation. 3 of the bays would be open and the other 4 would have industrial style roller shutter doors. That's just the basic roof plan. And there you can see the front elevation with the roller shutter doors and the open bays to this side. This is the east elevation. It is proposed to clad the base plinth below the timber cladding in natural stone. That's the rear, the south-facing elevation, and the west. So there's just some photographs here to show you the context of the site. This is looking south. You can see the cattle corral and the pens here, and the building would go in this kind of darker, scrubby area here where the tree is. It would run across like that. That's just a closer view, the same view, so it's looking south at the application site. You can see the corral and the cattle pens, and the building would be located here. This next slide is looking northwest. So the east gable elevation would be just about here where the black silage bags are, and it would run across towards the tree. And again, looking northwest from further back, again you can see the silage bags and the tree, and the building would run roughly across in that area. This is all open access land here, so you can, I think this photograph demonstrates the expansive views, and that the building would appear as a large isolated structure unrelated to any other built development in the area. This slide I think demonstrates that even better. You've got again this darker area of tree cover, that's where the building would be. You're looking across this very open plateau area up towards Wardlow Haycop. This is a view from the footpath from the east, coming off the moor. You can see the access track here, snaking up the hillside. The building would be up here on the top of the plateau there. This slide just shows some of the planting that Natural England are proposing to screen the building. And this is an area of wider planting that is proposed in the long term. So the main driver behind the scheme is to provide for the effective management of the National Nature Reserve. And of course, in principle, these aims are supported and welcomed. But as well as being rich in biodiversity, this area of the National Park is of high landscape value. And therefore it's crucial that these impacts are given significant weight. The applicants did submit a landscape and visual commentary document with the application that identifies viewpoints from the surrounding area. And we do agree with much of the descriptive elements of that report, but we don't agree with the conclusions that the report draws with regard to the impact of the development. For example, the report concludes that when viewed from the surrounding public access land, there would be a subtle change in the view proposed. And we don't question that it is apparent that there is farming activity taking place at the site, in that evidence is in the form of pens and fencing. But these are transient, low-key and low-lying features. In contrast, a new 31 metre by 10 metre building would appear as a substantial and imposing structure that would be at odds with the open character of the surrounding land. In the longer term, the planting proposed would serve to reduce the impact, but it's difficult to predict the full extent of that mitigation, and in any case it would take many years for that to take full effect. So since the last application, the agent has carried out an updated alternative sites assessment which looks at 4 possible alternative sites, and these are here on this drawing. So number 4 is the application site. Number 3 is the semi-derelict traditional barn that's about 170 metres to the north. And we agree with the conclusions of the agent that this is not a suitable alternative site because it's even more elevated than the application site and it would require an extension to the access track to reach it. So we agree that that's not suitable. So there's 2 sites with the most potential for a new building are sites 1 and 2, which are on either side of the access track leading up to site number 4. Site number 1 is a former quarry. You can see it here, this area here. It's a former quarry area that's been backfilled. There are limestone outcrops here, which are about 25 metres back from the access track. The land is lower than the access track, so there would need to be some engineering works to allow a building to be located there. And this is the other site, which is on the northern side of the access track. And here the land slopes upwards away from the track. The applicant states that their indications are that thousands of tonnes of made-up ground would need to be removed and banked around the site and that this would cause landscape harm. We've got no survey or drawings of this, and it's clear that some groundworks will be required, but we're not convinced that such large-scale stabilisation will be required to make this area suitable. The report also says that the rock outcrop here limits the extent of the usable area, but as you can see on this drawing here, plan here, there is sufficient space within Area 1, in our view, to site a building there. The report also states that the close interrelationship and indivisibility between the building and the cattle corral is essential for operational purposes, and that moving the cattle corral closer to site 1 would be impractical. And we appreciate that retaining the corral in its existing position may be the optimal setup for a practical point of view, but we've not been convinced that a corral could not be relocated further east in a way that, while not optimal, is still operationally viable. We accept that the sites 1 and 2 would be closer to the public road to the east, but not that they would have a similar landscape and visual effect as the chosen site 4. A building in one of these locations would be lower, at a lower topographical level, and would be enclosed by the existing quarry face and would be less visible, in particular from the open access land that surrounds the site. Consequently, our view remains that there is the potential for alternative schemes on these sites. But notwithstanding that, the lack of a firmly identified and agreed alternative site is not sound grounds for accepting the current proposals, which must be assessed on their own merits and which would cause harm to the landscape and scenic beauty of this part of the National Park. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've got one speaker, Miss Hilton. Welcome back. You know the ground rules now.
Is that on? Can I just, yeah.
It is on, yes.
The building is permitted development. There's a need for a new building at this site. Speakers at the previous committee, including the ward councillor, explained why this building is needed in this location. To respond to 4 comments made in the committee report and repeated today, officers question the amount of groundwork needed. There's a reasonable and proportionate amount of evidence that we've submitted for officers to be certain that there would be a significant degree of needless cut and fill necessary at the alternate sites. Officers consider the alternate sites 1 and 2 are of sufficient size. We'd say individual matters cannot be considered in isolation, and to say they're of sufficient size doesn't factor in the gradient, which is clear from viewing the site, or the challenges this creates for manoeuvring vehicles and machinery. Officers suggest moving the corral. Moving the corral would require moving cattle down the slope. It's not practical or viable, and that was explained by experienced herd managers at the last committee. There's disagreement with landscape impact. Assessment of impact has been undertaken on behalf of Natural England by Barnes Walker, by one of their most experienced landscape architects who are registered with the Landscape Institute. Respectfully, we feel the officer's preference is based on a misunderstanding of the alternate site features. Firstly, the steep topography of alternate sites makes both construction and operation unfeasible. The movement of livestock and machinery in and out of buildings requires flat or gentle sloping land. The extent of works to engineer these sites to be usable would result not only in additional costs but negative physical impacts on the landscape caused by the necessary cut and fill. The interrelationship of the corral and proposed building are critical for the ongoing function and cannot be underestimated. Our assessment demonstrates the application site is not only the most suitable location, but the only site that can meet the operational requirements in a way that is sensitive to the rural context. Members also requested further information about the scale of the building, and in essence, is this the smallest it can be? Quite simply, yes. The scale is driven by the need to store necessary equipment. We've considered both the quantity and size of this equipment, which includes large agricultural machinery, 3 tractor trailers, a livestock trailer, storage of fencing materials, tree stakes and tubes for Natural England's woodland management and fodder. Part of the building would also be used to accommodate pregnant cattle during calving. And also, Natural England aim to make hay, which needs to be stored in dry conditions. External storage requires use of plastic, a material Natural England is seeking to reduce its usage of. The size of the building is therefore considered to be the minimum required to perform these essential functions. To finish, I'd just like to emphasise our key points. The proposal does not introduce but expands an existing use and structures. The design is entirely suited to this rural context. Sitting at the end of the established track, no new access is needed. Comprehensive planting is proposed, enhancing appearance and biodiversity. The siting, scale, design and landscaping all combined to deliver a real beneficial landscape and visual effects in the longer term. I hope you can support this today. Thank you all.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, members, anyone got any contribution to make? David Chapman.
Thanks, Chair. It's the scale of the building that sort of doesn't ring true with me. I mean, the agent has related a list of storage needs, and I would question those. I mean, fencing materials can be brought onto site as and when required. And the question of hay versus silage and the use of plastic, I think if we're looking at a climate mitigation situation, I think that it would need an awful lot of years of plastic silage bale wrapper to offset the carbon footprint of a building of this size. So And I think basically looking at the landscape, looking at the area where the building is, I wouldn't want to think I was relying on hay in that kind of situation, because it's not the best area or best weather or anything like that. So if that could be, I'd be more favourable if that building was much more reduced in size. And the other ironic thing is that the breed of cattle that are being kept up there, which is the Belted Galloway, are basically will be Natural England's intention as a kind of regenerative farming situation, with that kind of breed that will live outside all of the year, and it's and the effect on the actual grassland. So I'm happy about the reason, but I'm not happy about the scale.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Ken Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Like David, my concern is the scale of the building to begin with, and its impact on the overall landscape because of its proposed location. I think just as an example, 31 metres is about twice the length of this boardroom, and 10 metres width is wider than this boardroom, and 4.4 metres, 5.5 metres goes higher than the ceiling, just to get an idea of the scale of the building that is being proposed in that exposed location. I think because this application has come back so quickly following the deferment at the last meeting, I think, with all due respect to the people involved, there has been insufficient time to demonstrate adequately for me that the alternative locations are not acceptable. So I feel I have to fall back on an assessment of what is being proposed and the location that it's being proposed in. The need, I've no problem with. It's the scale of the property, and particularly its location in that exposed landscape. I don't feel, Chair, that I could support this application. I can only go with the officer recommendation because of the scale and the landscape impact.
Is that a proposal?
It can be. I'll move the recommendation.
Well, it can be, is it?
Yes, yes, yes. I say I'll move the recommendation that following that prompting, Chair.
Andrew.
Chair, thank you. I wasn't able to be at the last planning committee, so this is a new one for me, but I'll take on board what colleagues are saying, and I come to this fresh. I guess we've got to recognise that there are legitimate operational needs, land management needs in remote locations of the national park, and we've got to do our best to meet landowners' requirements. But it's balancing landscape impact, isn't it? I mean, we've already acknowledged today that the impact on fragile landscapes such as Cressbrookdale and the wider Cressbrookdale area is very much in our thoughts. But the land still has to be managed in an efficient and proper way. I don't see why the alternative sites couldn't be made to work. But I guess my question of the officer, because I wasn't here last time, is the proposed site, there is landscaping in the form of planting proposed. That's a normal condition that we would ask any other applicant suggesting a large shed-like construction in the open landscape. Do we not think that will ameliorate the impact in the long term, or is the officer's view that the location is just too exposed, that any planting would not soften it sufficiently? Because I've walked around the area quite a lot, especially up on Longston Moor, and you do look down to that location, but you also notice that even though it's quite an open landscape, there are copses, there are shelter belts and woodland. Do we not think in the long run that would go some way to reducing the impact?
I'll come back on that one. I think you've probably, within your question, have answered some of it. You said there are some views sort of down towards the site. Obviously, that does limit the impact that the planting can have. Given the size of the building, it won't be able to be concealed. The tree planting in itself would not be out of place. You say there are copses of trees. Our view is that we can't have the certainty as the impact that they will have in terms of the extent of screening that would be provided. Perhaps more significantly is the period of time that would take to establish. Again, given the scale of the building, they're going to need to be large specimens that are well established before they have any impact. So we might be looking at 5-10 years longer, and obviously the fact that it is an exposed site as well can change the rate of maturity and the survival of the trees and how well they flourish. So there's a lot of unknowns there, but what we do know is that it will take a number of years for them to have a significant effect.
Chair, may I briefly, can I come back?
Please.
I thank you. That's useful to know. I think we've got to accept in principle the idea of the idea of field barns, of remote bases to land manage. We've got to accept in principle. I think I'm probably with Councillor Chapman on this, that the scale of what is proposed is probably the aspect that bothers me most here. And on that basis, I think I'm likely to go with the officer recommendation.
Right, I've got Kath Potter next, and then Andrew Hart.
Thank you, Chair. I'm having difficulty over the screening, having suffered the effects of diseased trees on our land and seeing how it's been decimated. I speak from experience. And given the site in design and huge external appearance, it's all right planting lots of trees to lessen the effects. But how long will they take to grow and provide cover? But with a huge number of various types of trees now suffering from disease, one questions, can we really rely on these said trees to cover? We could end up with no cover at all.
Thank you, Kath. Andrew Hart, and then I'm going to take a vote, I think.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, I've got one here.
I do feel that perhaps it's a rather large building, perhaps in the wrong place, and I think that possibly site 1 and 2 might be more appropriate with a little bit more work. Again, I agree with Kath about tree planting. We've had stuff locally where we've had a 50% mortality rate, and this is a harsh environment. So if the baseline that most planting it dies within the first year, 50%, it could take a long time for it to establish in that particular location without going for root ball trees, which are exceptionally expensive. So I would be inclined to follow the officer's recommendation. I think they need to go away and rethink this one. Thank you.
And William?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to make one or two things clear to members. For a start, the latest tractors are about 9 feet high, so that's one of the reasons why the building is high. If you're going to put livestock into a building, which we'll have to do from time to time, there's got to be enough room for them to be managed, and one thing and another, say if we're coming in for TT tests and what have you. As regards the argument about the breed and all the rest of it, the Belter Galloway is a breed, a hardy breed, which can basically doesn't need a lot of high input food. If you give them too much of a high input food, like silage, and you don't mix it with hay, well, you will end up with a calf that's too big to come out, and you'll end up with a caesarean or a terrible calving. I know, I've got experience of it. And the thing is, they're nearly all spring calving cattle, I should imagine, and as a result, if you start giving them silage and stuff like that, at the latter end, a calf grows twice as much, it's twice as big in the last 6 weeks, and that's when you'll get problems. If you feed them hay, you'll get a leaner one, so you need a building suitable for hay, and you have to have a high building because, for these loaders to be able to go in and out and stack them. And yes, there is problems with getting trees established. Half of the reason is we've got deer wandering about all over the place, and yes, you will lose 50%, but if you put 50% more in to start with, you'll alleviate the problem. So that's just my point of view.
Thank you very much. I don't think I've got a seconder. You're going to second it. I mean, I can I just say I agree with the point about the size of the building, but it's not just its size; it's sort of rather a monolithic building, which is suitable on the, which is very prominent in this sort of location. What does worry me is if you put it part way down the hill, you're going to extend the farming activities from the lower site right the way up to the existing corral and things at the top. So that whatever happens here has to be very carefully balanced. But I agree with the basic resolution. So can I put it to the vote, please? All those in favour of refusal on the ground set out in the report? 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
And those against?
1.
1. And those abstaining? 1. I hope you've got the messages from that. Oh, right, yes, okay. Yeah, okay. Well, wait, when we get to the item. Right, thank you, members. Just for the record, Councillor Chapman has left the meeting, and we're on to item 6 on the agenda, Forget-Me-Not Cottage, Main Street, Chelmorton. Who's dealing with this one? You, Mark?
Thank you, Chair. This application is for the amalgamation of 2 affordable dwellings to a single dwelling house in Chelmorton. The site is on Main Street in Chelmorton, in the centre of the village. You can see behind me here, it's the land edged red. This plan actually predates the dwellings being constructed on the site, so it appears an empty plot. There's 2 semi-detached dwellings in the middle of the plot, which you'll see in the photographs as we come to those. There we go. So in this photograph, the main street is running to the left of the image, and you've got the driveway coming into the site, and the building is split horizontally as you look at it there. So you've got one dwelling in this side and another dwelling in the other. And you can see the proposed site plan. There's no changes there to the layout of the site itself. And these are the photographs from the road, and you can see that it's set well back from the road, and 2 front doors and arrangement of windows, and it's set out symmetrically. Further photograph, you can see there the gable that's projecting to the rear of the property. And these are the floor plans as they exist at the moment, so the 2 properties are effectively mirroring each other there. And this is the proposed ground floor. So it would be converted into one. The front door to the property on the left would be removed and replaced by a window. And the floor plan would be opened up so that it was a single living space. And this is the existing first floor. And there you go, you can see it be changed to become a 5-bedroom property with a large landing area and 2 bathrooms. In terms of the elevations, the changes are minimal. You can see there's a change to the window detailing between that side elevation there and the proposed. The rear elevation, as proposed, unchanged. The other side, fully glazed door replacing the timber door that's there at present. With the main change taking place on the principal elevation, so that's the existing. And then as proposed, one front door is lost and replaced by a matching window. So the principal issue here, the application is recommended for refusal, and it's on principally on the grounds of the loss of the affordable dwellings as they currently exist. So the 2 existing dwellings, they have 75 metres squared floor space each, and they're subject to legal agreements restricting their occupation to local people meeting the authorities' standard local occupancy criteria. The proposals would combine these dwellings into a single dwelling house, including the minor alterations that you've seen there. The resultant dwelling would therefore have a floor space of 150 square metres. The applicant's living arrangements are somewhat unusual at the moment. There's a single household of 2 adults and 3 children living across the 2 houses, which is why they're requesting to change it into a single house, as the whole family isn't able to be accommodated in either one of the dwellings individually at the moment. Whilst we do recognise that this is an undesirable arrangement, the proposals raise significant planning policy and housing stock implications. As a family of 5, there is no policy or other material rationale for supporting a dwelling of this size under our affordable housing policies, and it wouldn't constitute an affordable dwelling by size. The applicants have offered to enter into a replacement legal agreement that would secure the return of the dwelling back to 2 affordable dwellings once their own occupation of the property ceases. However, our concerns with that are that we have no control over when that circumstance would arrive, and until such time as it did, the 2 affordable dwellings are lost from the village's housing stock. The only way we could really trigger such a legal agreement coming into force would be when the occupation ceases. And as I say, we have no control over when that would be. And for that reason, the application is recommended for refusal, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have one speaker, Fiona Stevenson.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I do the photo for consideration.
Can I just say, we did do a site visit from outside yesterday. We know what it looks like. We don't put papers round at the meeting, so we'll leave that one there for the moment, if you don't mind. But we are familiar with the location.
I can describe it. The family is obviously a family of 5 and struggle with their current living accommodation. They can't all be accommodated in the kitchen at one time and would struggle in the sitting room for the same reason. So Tom is also in attendance to answer any questions. I'm the agent on the matter. The family consists of Tom and Caroline and their 3 children, Beth, who is 12, Emma is 9 and Charlie is 6. They currently own both houses and they live across the 2. I'm going to address the report and the conclusion of the planner based on the interpretation of policy. And then secondly, I'm going to ask members to consider the scenario where the application is refused. The planner recommends that the application be refused based, ultimately, on the premise that passing the application would result in the loss of 2 affordable local needs houses, and that this would be contrary to the spirit of the policy. And it is also stated that the size threshold would be exceeded. I would argue that there is no loss of local needs houses if the application is passed. The application is for the reconfiguration of the internal space of 2 houses which the applicants currently own. So there's no available local needs houses. If the application is passed, there will be no loss of local needs houses because the houses are occupied. Further, going forward, there would be no loss of local needs houses in perpetuity. The DMP expressly allows for the entering into of Section 106 agreements, which would ensure that the larger property will be designed in such a way as to allow for its operation as 2 smaller houses in perpetuity. The house could simply be reinstated as 2 homes should it leave the applicant's ownership. The planner states that this would only operate where the household is larger than 5 persons. However, the DMP actually states that where evidence supports the need for a larger house, that applicants should explore with the authority the scope for a larger house. A need here is surely not in question. 5 people cannot fit in a 75 square metre home easily, and it is hoped that the planner is not suggesting that a 6-year-old should live in a separate house. If the proposed scenario expressly called out in policy of a larger home that could operate as 2 homes again in the future is not available to applicants, then it should not be proposed. Regarding the contrariness to the spirit of policy that the planner supposedly identifies, I would argue that the contrariness to the spirit of policy exists only if the application is refused. Firstly, the policy to whose spirit we are referring here is GSP 1, which states that new development is only allowed in exceptional circumstance. But no new development is proposed here, simply removal of internal walls. We simply want to allow children to get to their bedrooms without having to first go outside. It is Chelmorton. It's pretty cold. Secondly, the spirit of a local needs...
Fiona, I must ask you to sum up. You're given 3 minutes, so I'd be very grateful if you could draw it fairly rapidly to a conclusion.
I will try. The planner states that passing the application would be to the detriment of the socio and economic well-being of the community. And I would argue that the opposite is true, and the refusal of the application would be far more detrimental. The current situation, where a family with young children are trying to live a normal life across 2 houses for lack of space in one, is unsustainable. But options in the locality which would afford enough space are financially impossible. The family then, should the application be refused, are forced from the village. 6-year-old Charlie can't walk to see his uncle. 12-year-old Beth can't walk to see her auntie.
No, I'm sorry, I'm going to bring this to a conclusion. I want one final sentence from you, and we'll draw it there.
I think that the common sense application here is to allow the amalgamation of the two homes. This is a local family, and if we refuse the application, you're forcing a local family from the village. And surely that's not what we're trying to achieve here with local needs policy.
Thank you very much. Right. Members, Andrew McCloy, I have so far.
Chair, let me kick this off. It's
Oh, and William Marmot is next.
it's hard not to have some sympathy with the applicant, and I do agree with a lot of what the speaker says in terms of the spirit of the policy. But what I'm struggling with in terms of the officer's recommendation is that the argument seems to be that if we allow the application to proceed, we will lose 2 affordable units, and it's difficult to know or predict when that trigger will be, when it will come back to be affordable unit. But in the meantime, it will be a home for a local family, a large local home for a large local family. And surely that's what we're trying to achieve. I can see the merit in agreeing a legal arrangement where at some unspecified point in the future it might come back if that family decide to leave. But if they don't decide to leave, it will be a family home going forwards, which is surely desirable. I think if that legal agreement was struck, then I'm not entirely sure we should be losing the second front door, so that we leave the opportunity for it to be divided back into 2. But the principle of consolidating a house for a permanent house for a local family is surely one we can support.
Thank you, Andrew. William, I have, and then William. Yeah, no, you're next, then Mike.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Well, I also understood that you didn't have to have planning permission to alter the internal size, the internal fittings of a house. And, you know, that's my point, really. Do you need it? Okay. They're going to be 2 affordables sort of taken out, but they are still, they've got young people growing up in them, and if they were to be revert back, well, they could revert back if they wanted to be sold or something like that, and surely this could be controlled by conditions, and as it stands, we've got a local family that need a bigger house, and they've got one next door, and they should be allowed to do it.
Can you just wait half a sec, Mike, whilst I answer that, because there's an interesting point. I did raise this at the agenda meeting. Can you explain what the answer to what is being said here? You don't normally need planning permission to convert 2 houses, so 2 houses into 1. So why have we got a planning application here?
I think you're right to reference the word normally. There's the reason you wouldn't typically need planning permission to... Is that stayed on? Sorry. The reason you wouldn't typically need planning permission to change 2 dwellings into 1 is because there's no material change of use. Yeah. And it's material there. Ordinarily, there's no change in impact from 1 to 2, or very little. What we have to look at is whether there is a material change that makes this a material change of use. In our view, the change of use, it is material because of the fact that we're losing those 2, using the housing stock is being changed by the application, and that's the reason why we consider planning permission is needed here.
Well, right, okay, I'm not sure about that.
I have to say, we can discuss that further if it's needed, but I think the focus really should be on the principle that you're already discussing, because if it was to be concluded that planning permission isn't needed here, we'd be looking at a variation to the legal agreement that's already in place instead. So, so ultimately we would be having to deal with a variation to legal agreements instead of a planning application, and we would be going through this same process of considering the impacts and whether the legal agreements as they existed were still required.
Because the present legal agreement says you can't put the two together. Am I right there?
There's two separate legal agreements, one for each property. So yes, that would prevent that from happening. So you would need to vary or replace those anyway, and you would need to rehearse these same arguments that you're now having.
So the real thing here that we're looking at is not the planning permission, but it's the legal agreement, because that's the real impediment to these two things being put together.
Yeah.
Have I got that right?
If members were to move to approve this application, then the new legal agreement would need to be put in place prior to being issued if members felt it was necessary for it to return to 2 units. But in any case, there would need to be variation to the existing agreements or the annulment of them if members didn't feel that.
Yes, please do.
Yeah. Just to add that we have obviously validated this as a planning application, so we're on a path to determining this application as well.
I'm a bit nervous about that, but I don't think it's going to affect the outcome. We can work out the mechanics later, but there is an issue there. Mike Chapman, sorry about that.
Thank you, Chair. This is an unusual situation, and the trouble with our planning rules and as they set out, they don't often deal with unusual and exceptional situations. I can think of 2 sets of properties in my own city, Sheffield, where you have the 2 people living side by side have put their homes together and carried on living amicably. So it should be possible to make this work and to put in a legal agreement that at such time as the 2 properties are vacated, as the now consolidated 1 property is vacated, that it can be returned to 2 properties. There must be a way to make that happen, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And I've got Andrew Hart next.
It's difficult when you're a common sense person and you have sometimes to sit on a planning applications committee and you can't quite see things in common sense terms. The applicants have come here to ask for a formal arrangement so that they can join together 2 houses which are local needs affordable, which they own and they occupy each. And they're looking for a formal agreement that can allow the family to live in 1 unit combined, or 2 units combined into 1. The applicant could have gone down to Tool Station, bought a £3 lump hammer and a chisel and knocked a hole through. He could have done that, but he's come here to ask formally if he can join those 2 houses together. And if we sort of refuse this out of hand, he's very likely to go down and to Tool Station and buy that £3 lump hammer and chisel and knock it together. And nobody would actually know, unless somebody informed on him, that they've joined those houses together. I can't see why we can't have some common sense, and we can't go into a new legal agreement that means that when they no longer need those 2 houses, they go back to being 2 houses. That isn't, in my estimation, as a common sense person, insurmountable. We're not losing them. We're just rationalising the stock. And sometimes, occasionally, Chair, I think we do have to do that. Rather than take a solid heels in the ground view. Thank you.
The thing is, actually, when you think about it, this family could carry on living there perfectly legitimately just by walking out the one front door and in through the other. Are you making a proposal?
I'm not at the moment. I want to listen to
Well, is there anybody else that wants to speak or anybody that wants to make a proposal? Right, Ken Richardson from Barnsley.
Yeah, I don't know where it's coming from, this application, because I've just heard that this couple own these properties outright. Now, if they wanted to sell them and move on to a bigger house and left them boarded up, that would be moving them from stock. But they're still living there and they own them outright, and it's been said, I'd use a skill saw, not an hammer. They could have done it months ago. But they've come here in a right manner, and to be honestly, they've been getting bad advice. I would move that this application is approved.
Has anybody else got any contribution to make to that motion?
Chair.
Which one?
I think, given the way the meeting's going, I think we have to return to the point that Andrew McCloy's raised about the front door, and whether that part of the application is acceptable, or whether we feel that we should respect the fact that the building.
I think the impression that we got on site yesterday was it was the whole door that was going to be glassed in, whereas this plan that we're seeing now is slightly different. Do any, well, first of all, do officers have any view on that, and do any members have a view on that?
The property was designed with a sense of symmetry, as you can see from the existing plan there. And that is lost in the proposed plan, and you do end up with something that appears as a less well-balanced, long single property. So our view would, and this isn't set out in the report, I don't think it was considered in great detail, if I'm honest about that. It would be preferable to retain the existing in terms of the appearance of the building, would be my view.
Does any member dissent from that view?
My point of view would be that, in essence, this is going to be two affordable dwellings which are going to be amalgamated into one for the use of this applicant, so that the two doors should be maintained.
I think most of us would agree with that, wouldn't we? Yeah. So I think I have a motion now to approve this, which will carry with it a resolution to amend the Section 106 agreement accordingly. Have you got any conditions that you would want to add on to this?
On the basis of the comments just made, we could have a condition which requires an alternative scheme of design for that second door. It might be that the applicant wants to, for instance, internally board it in a reversible manner, so that they don't internally at least have a second door into their living area. And we could do that by condition.
Okay. Andrew McCloy?
Chair, just so I'm clear, if that's the case, then the applicant can go ahead with all the internal changes as proposed and effectively make this one unit for the whole family. I mean, on that basis, and with the condition that we keep, even superficially, that second door, so that if further down the line the opportunity arose to take it back into two units, that could be kept valid, then I'll be very happy to support it.
Okay. Well, I'm now going to put, is everybody clear what we're voting on? That's seconded it.
Provided it's subject to a Section 106 agreement, and that will be a new Section 106 agreement that needs to be signed up by all the parties, because I'm not sure what the interest is in both the properties, so it would need to cover both of those. So.
Yes, we take that, absolutely. Right, all those in favour of the resolution? Motion. 1, 2,
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Those against? Those abstaining? 2. Right, it's 11 o'clock. I've seen all the people coming in to speak on the next application coming in. I'm very sorry, but I'm going to adjourn until 11:05, just for a quick break. Anybody who wants to get an extra cup of coffee or whatever. So if we can all settle down. And the next application is, well, it's not that one. It's the Tissington application. Land northwest of Sharplow Cottages in Tissington. You are going to introduce it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. The application site is on the northwest edge of Tissington Village. This is Rakes Lane, which heads into the village from the northwest. And the site sits on the southern edge of a larger field parcel. And the land slopes down fairly steeply, actually, towards the road. There's a pair of traditional semi-detached properties here, known as Sharplow Cottages. The site is outside the conservation area boundary. The boundary actually runs around the curtilage of Sharplow Cottages down to the southeast. And there's a right-of-way that runs west to east across the field here on the opposite side of the road. And Sharplow Cottages represents the northern edge of the village at this point, so we consider that the application site is on the edge of the village. The planning permission is sought for the erection of a detached two-storey local needs dwelling. This is the block plan. So the principal elevation would face the road, and it would have an L-shaped plan form with a parking area adjacent here and a new access formed here onto Rakes Lane. That's a closer up view, so you can see it's proposed for a lawned garden area and a paved area around the dwelling. And I say this is the front elevation, which roughly lines up with the front elevations of the existing houses at Sharplow Cottages. Generally, the orientation is in keeping with the pattern of development in the conservation area. Well, this is the ground floor plan with a kitchen, dining room and living room. First floor, 3 bedrooms and bathroom. That's the roof plan that shows the sort of gabled projection off the rear. It's fairly traditional double-fronted principal elevation with a canopy over the front door and chimneys. Materials would be limestone with a clay-tiled roof. And that's the northwest elevation. And that's the rear elevation with a set of French windows there. And that's the southeast elevation facing towards Sharplow Cottages. As originally submitted, we did have some concerns that the dwelling was going to be quite perched and elevated in relation to Sharplow Cottages. So this is an amended scheme which actually shows the dwelling dug in further. So this is the road level here, so it would be dug in and dug in where the land rises up at the rear. And as a result, it's generally the height of the dwelling would be in keeping with the pattern of development adjacent. So it would relate reasonably well to Sharplow Cottages. The land does naturally rise along Rakes Road to the northwest, and it just gently follows that rise in the land. So this is a photograph looking southeast along Rakes Lane. You can see Sharplow Cottages here, and this is a little outbuilding in the garden. And the new dwelling would be sort of pretty much adjacent to that outbuilding here. So it would be in this location, facing out towards the road, and the new access point would be around here. It would sit sort of side by side with Sharplow Cottages, so we're satisfied that there would be no opportunities for overlooking. and the intervening building also provides some screening in those respects. The southeast elevation, the southeast gable would be located roughly here, and the house would extend across the frontage there. And that's just another view that shows the land rising up away from the road. It would be dug into this corner of the field parcel. So overall, we are satisfied that the dwelling would conserve the character of the area and the setting of the conservation area. And that's another view looking up Rakes Road. The dwelling would be just here in this corner again. The applicant and his partner live with his parents in the village, and he's lived in the village his whole life. The District Council, as the Housing Authority, have confirmed that the applicant is eligible to join the housing register, and so we're satisfied that the applicants do have a housing need. The main issue with this application is the size of the dwelling. The applicants are a couple, and the proposals are for a dwelling with a floor space of 97 square metres, which is the maximum threshold for a 5-person dwelling. The adopted policy DMH1 specifies a maximum gross internal floor area for 2 people of 58 square metres. So restrictions on floor space are the strongest tool that the authority has as a local planning authority to control value and to ensure that houses can continue to serve a land use purpose for those who are in housing need. And the identified needs of an area can range from single people through to family homes, and it's important to achieve a varied affordable stock, and so the policy limits the size of the house to the current identified need rather than any future aspirations or preferences of the applicant. If we accepted every new affordable home at any size proposed up to the maximum threshold, it would defeat these objectives and would ultimately deliver a housing stock of larger dwellings that would be oversized and unaffordable to many with identified need. And this approach has been supported by inspectors at appeal on a number of occasions. Nonetheless, in 2021, the authority members did approve a practice note which provides some flexibility to upper floor limits as set out in DMH1, and that allows couples of 2 people to apply for homes of up to 70 square metres. But clearly at 97, we're still here significantly over that upper limit. And it does equate to a 5-person dwelling. So consequently, the proposals are contrary to DMH1 and the advice in the practice note and are recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We have 4 speakers, and the first one, I'm going to take them in the order on the list. The first one is Ms. Laura Melstrom. Thank you very much. There's a button somewhere in front of you which will turn the microphone on, and you have 3 minutes in which to make your point, please.
Thank you very much. I'm here today as a Green Party campaigner. I don't have any connection to the applicant, and I haven't spoken to him at all until earlier today. The rationale for limiting house size to immediate need, which is as far as I can see, the only objection to this application, is that if everyone's allowed to build to the maximum size, then most of the affordable housing stock is going to be family-sized, too expensive and out of reach of people trying to get on the property ladder. Now, I agree that it's important to have a range of sizes, but that shouldn't be an absolute bar on going beyond immediate need where the circumstances are right. With a self-build project, you can't expect people to invest their money in a house that only meets their immediate needs. It's a big investment of time and emotional commitment as well as money. And you're only going to do that if you're looking to the future. And in this area, you can't easily move on when your family gets bigger. The needs of the community are also relevant. And as the Parish Council has pointed out in its supportive response to this application, which is in the pack, the demographics of the village need to be more balanced, and there is a desperate need for young families in the village. Restricting permission to immediate need is also sometimes inefficient and wasteful. The land and resources needed to build a 70 square metre house are not that much less than for a 97 square metre house. On sustainability, with my Green Party hat on, I'd obviously prefer this application to include a greener heating system, so I'd invite the committee to grant permission with conditions requiring the inclusion of solar panels and an air source heat pump to reduce the long-term carbon footprint of the house. And as the officer mentioned, although I don't think you did refer to this application, permission has already been granted in the past by this committee for houses larger than the immediate need limit. There's a precedent in August of 2021 when this committee granted permission for 2 local needs houses of 97 square metres each, the same size as this one, in Tideswell, where one applicant was in a relationship and the other one was single. And that permission was based on the expected future needs of the applicants for family homes and to keep them in the village. So I would ask the committee to take the long view here. I understand this applicant is happy to agree to a local resident restriction, so that will make the house a long-term community asset for Tissington, even though it's in private ownership, because it will remain affordable, i.e. outside the open market. Finally, I'd like to add that young people committed to living and working and raising their families in the Peak District are also themselves a community asset. If people are willing to invest their own land and money and energy to produce an asset which is of long-term benefit to the area, then this committee should encourage that investment and allow this application with appropriate conditions.
Thank you very much. The next speaker I have is our old friend Chris Carr. Welcome back, Chris.
Is that on? Good morning, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. Some of you may remember me from 2019 when I was a member of this committee. For those who don't know me, I am Stephen's granddad. About Stephen, he was born in Tissington and hopes to get married later this year. He often helps me on the farm with calving cows, TB testing, examining cows' feet, tractor driving, and many jobs that crop up on the farm. But it's not just work, as you all know. Tissington is famous for its well dressings, and although there is the designing and dressing of the wells, there are a lot of jobs behind the scenes that need young men to carry out. The clay needs to be dug and distributed. The boards need to be erected on the Wednesday night and taken down the following Wednesday. So as you can see, we need to keep some young people in the village. The population of the park is ageing, as you are very well aware. When your new CEO joined the park, one of the first things he said, we seem to have a shortage of local needs housing. This is an opportunity to address this. When I was on the committee, I was told by an officer that we should not use common sense in planning. I hope you will take the common sense approach and appeal to you all to approve this application. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chris. You've not changed. The next speaker I have is Sir Richard Fitzherbert.
Thank you very much. Good morning, members of the committee. As you know, my name is Richard Fitzherbert, and I'm a member of Derbyshire Dales District Council, and I've represented the ward of Parwich and Dovedale since 2011, which includes Tissington. I'm also the chair of the Tissington Parish Council and the owner of Tissington Hall Estate, that's been in our family for 500 years. I'm sure you've all visited Tissington. It was good to see so many of you yesterday. It was a shame that you could not see the rest of the village. I'd have preferred you to have gone on past the house and out the avenue, but never mind. But I've got a permanent offer for this committee and your officers who visit regularly to take you on a tour of the village and estate and show that although we live in one of, I quote, one of the prettiest villages in Derbyshire, we do have many issues and we need to solve them. I've lived there 34 years and shown the village to 5 chief execs, numerous past members and chairs of the authority, as well as several MPs, and more recently the Minister for National Parks this December. We're incredibly lucky to live in such a lovely place, but on account of our vernacular housing stock, we are turning into an old folks village, and I'm sort of one of the younger ones at the moment, and I'm getting on. And that's definitely what we don't need, as the other speakers are saying, if our community is to flourish. There are 45 properties in the village, I know them pretty well, of which 35 are 2 bedrooms, only 1 is 3 bedrooms, and only 4 are more than 4 bedrooms, including our house. You can see the imbalance that's already been mentioned in our housing stock. The application before you is for a modest 3-bedroom property for a local needs village couple, and as has already been stated, the family has strong ties with the village, and you'll witness that from their talk in a second. They're well known. They contribute to the well dressings, as Chris has said, churchyard maintenance, the village hall, the annual village litter pick, the local brass band, and other community events. We need these youngsters to stay. They're the future of our village, of our community. Some may think, as the present custodian of the estate after our family's presence, that I might be against developing in the village, but I realise that we must let our village evolve. We need the evolution. We need the evolution of the buildings, and we need local needs housing for families such as this. This is one of the first steps, so I urge you to approve this application. I appreciate that the proposal is not technically within the defined limits, as has been stated, but there's no point in building another 2-bedroom property in the village to add to the other 34, and without a view to the future, as the applicant will say. The village feels very strongly on this point and has asked me to represent them. So, members, please, on behalf of our Tissington Parish Council and the estate, I urge you members to overturn the officer's conclusion to recommend this application for approval for the future of our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the last speaker I have is Mr. Stephen Carr.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. My great-grandparents moved to Tissington to work on Overfields Farm in 1910. And in 1924, they were able to buy a farm of their own. Townhead Farm has been owned by the family ever since, and I have grown up there. I'm engaged to marry my fiancée Crystal in August, and we are looking to start a family of our own. We need our own space, but given my strong ties to the village, we would prefer not to leave. However, high house prices in the area mean that there's no available properties that we can afford. We would therefore like to build a new house to allow us to stay in the village. We've worked with your planning officers throughout the application process and have reached the point where they are satisfied our need is genuine and that the house will fit in with the traditional character of the village. We've tried hard to make sure that the property would be well related to the existing houses and buildings on the edge of the village and would not be a prominent in the landscape. It is clear from the officer's report that the only sticking point is the size of the house. Whilst the house is slightly bigger than the normally allowed for 2 people, the reason for that is we are looking to start a family, and it makes sense to design the property with this in mind so that we don't have to extend or move. According to the council's practice notes, the size of the house would be acceptable for 3 people, which we hope it will need to accommodate in the near future. The house does not exceed the council's maximum size for a family home. We understand the need for the property to remain affordable and have no issue with this being a requirement of the permission. This is not about profit, it's about building a family home that can adapt to our changing needs as the family grows, and which will allow us to bring our children up in the village and breathe new life into it. hopefully one day the house will be passed on to our children to keep families linked to the village. On that basis, we hope that the committee can approach this scheme sympathetically to our circumstances and approve our application. On behalf of me and Crystal, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Right, I'm going to take a note of speakers. I've got Andrew McCloy, Jenny, Mike, William, Kath, Dermot, David. Is there anybody that doesn't want to speak? I mean, right. Right, can I start off with Andrew McCloy?
Chair, thank you. Although I've got a sneaking feeling we might be of a similar mind here. Let's cut straight to the chase. This is all about the size of the property. Everything else stacks up: eligibility, landscape impact, amenity access. So let's get down to what this is about, which is the floor space and the size. I understand why we've got the policy. I've backed the policy before. The practice note is sensible, and I think in many contexts we need to follow that through and back it. But the more that I've understood the Tissington context, including the site visit yesterday, the more I think there is especially with this location, there's something exceptional about it. Because if we think of the applicant and what we've just heard, born and bred in Tissington, want to carry on a family farming succession in this village, and want to start and grow a family, it's reasonable. We say let's start with a small house and then look to either to expand that house or move to another house. But as we've heard from Sir Richard, the housing stock is fairly limited in Tissington. I had a glance at the Tissington and Lee Hall parish statement. Of the 65 properties, 45 are rented. I had a quick look on Rightmove and one or two house sale websites. The only properties in the area, not in Tissington, were exorbitantly expensive. So I think it's quite unfair, almost unreasonable to expect young applicants to establish a small house and then say, right, go and find a bigger one if you want to expand your family. I also wonder whether, given the context of the conservation area and the estate village, whether we actually really want the applicant, say 4 or 5 years down the line, to come back to us with, well, we need to extend this house we've just built that way or that way. It might not be practical, we might not give it permission, it might not be desirable for the look of the environment as well. So for all these reasons, I think there's a compelling argument that whilst policy is a guide, we've got to inject some common sense in this particular case, and everything I've heard it convinces me that this is approvable, and on that basis I will move approval.
Second.
Right, thank you. It's moved and seconded. Right, I've got Ginny Priestley next.
I have a feeling that we're all going to be of the similar mind to Andrew, because Andrew's just made a lot of the points that I wanted to make. One of the pillars of this authority is a thriving and sustainable community, and that is very much what we're looking at here. And I do respect the fact that officers have to work within the policy, but on this occasion I do think common sense needs to prevail, as we've been asked to look at, and that I'm fully in support of this at the size it's at.
Thank you. Mike Chaplin.
I think there's going to be a lot of short speeches, really, because Andrew and Ginny have taken most of what I'd want to say on this, and I'm certainly in support of. I certainly support this application. Is that on?
Thank you very much. William? Oh, beg your pardon. You said you were going to be. You said you were going to be short.
Yeah, but the point I want to make is about DMH1, because the thing that DMH1 doesn't capture is that people can multiply, and what might apply to someone who needs an affordable house at 50 or 60 or 70 is different to what people might need in their 20s and 30s.
If I can help a little bit with that, the problem is not DMH1. It is the reference in various policy documents to the word need. And need is, as I've said several times in this committee in the past, is a word which is actually relative. I'm stuck in the middle of the Sahara dying of thirst and I need a drink. I've finished the planning committee and I've gone home and I need a drink. They're both words saying need, but one of them is rather more essential than the other. And so there's a question of interpretation, if you like, as to what is meant by need. And you can interpret it, obviously, as absolute desperate need at this moment of time, or you can look at it in terms of long-term needs. And that, I think, is where the issue lies. William.
Thank you, Chair. I think one of the points which hasn't been brought out in the note is the fact that if you've got an affordable house, when the family grows, you can't build an extension on it. And that's something that you have to take into consideration when you're looking at what the planners think is a size which is too great. And I think, like everybody else, if we don't have young people staying in the village, they'll go elsewhere. I mean, if any of you have been watching that programme on television about you can buy a house for €1 in Sicily because all the young people have gone. Are we going to reach that situation by applying what, in my mind, are nitpicking rules? I know you'll not like that, that's phrase, but, you know, we've got to use common sense here. It's been mentioned by a number of people, and this house should go forward. It ticks all the other boxes, so let's go for it.
Thank you very much. I can't read my own writing now. Kath Potter. Well, can we hear what people have got to say, and then you can answer that. I've got Kath Potter,
Right.
then I've got David Chapman, then I'll have Andrew Hart, and then Mark, you can come back in again. Well, if it's quick.
I can see where the conversation is going, but I just wanted one point of clarity on, and that was where William said that you can't extend an affordable house once it's been approved or built. There would be a restriction on that by legal agreement, that you wouldn't be able to carry that out under permitted development, but you could still apply, and we would judge it in the same way as we would any other within the house size guidelines. So I just wanted to be clear that that is still a possibility once a house has been built. Thank you.
Hold on a moment. There's a policy DMH7 which says that you're not allowed, that we will not permit extensions to affordable houses beyond 10%. So
That's right.
So if you build a 70 square whatever it is house, and you have too many children, you're only allowed to extend by 7 square meters. Whereas if you build it to the right size in the first place, if I can put it that way around, you've got an extra 20 square meters. That I think is that is crucial to the arguments, I think, that are in this report. Kath, can I come back to you?
Thank you, Chair. I agree with your statement. Right, it's important to note that national park authorities already have a statutory duty to seek to foster the social and economic well-being of local communities within the national park. No one can dispute that this application is needed. I agree totally with what Patrick has just said. I find there is an imbalance somehow that in our policy we expect people to get married and then they have children and the house is too small. It is ludicrous. I think we have to take into consideration that most people get married because they want children, and therefore they should have a house capable of bringing up those children in it. I have no problems whatsoever with this. I think the first speaker hit the nail on the head when she says about size of house, and I would totally concur. I don't need to say any more because I think everybody's going to say the same thing. We might as well have a vote now.
Well, I think there are more speakers to come yet, I'm afraid. I've got Dermot next, please.
Thanks, Chair. I support this application, and I think it's a rare opportunity, especially in the Tissington area, to have a local needs house built. Everybody else has said most of the things I wanted to say. My concern, and I've used this phrase before, it's future-proofing these developments, these houses, and whatever. This is another point. Could we have a review stroke debate with members and officers at some point to look at this area of policy? And, because we've come across this on several occasions now, and I'd like to see us do that. But I do support the application, and I think it's welcome.
I'll come back to that point later on, if I may. That was Dermot. I've got David Chapman, and then I've got Andrew Hart, I think, after that.
Thanks, Chair. Interesting to hear what you do after planning, actually.
Sorry?
Interesting to hear what you do after planning committee with your needs.
Large drink.
Yeah.
And it's not tea.
We have a policy DMH1, and the scale of size here outlines what's possible. But I've listened to this as an individual situation and of a family that's got an established history in Tissington, has got a genuine reason, and I think that it's worthy of an exception. And I'd just like to say, anybody driving along Rakes Lane, would they really know whether something was 70 square metres or 97 on first glance? I think looking at it from a landscape perspective, it wouldn't be that glaring. So, I'm happy for this to be an exception, and I'll be supporting it.
Andrew Hart?
Yeah, being a person of common sense, there's a special mix in Tissington, and we've had that outlined. The relationship with the number of rented properties that there are, and also the size and types of the property. There are special circumstances. This is a long-established family farming in the local area, and we need to have what I used to remember an old boss of mine used to say, succession planning. That we need to future-proof our communities, or we will end up with the Sicily situation. And I really, I'm going to have to support this, because I think it's the common sense thing to do. It's a special circumstance relating to this application, and I'm going to support it.
Thank you very much. I have no more speakers. Brian, you said you wanted to make a point.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a general point on the term common sense. I know what you, and I think the important thing I would say is, and I'm very pleased at the way that Andrew started out, because what we try to do in planning training, and to stress to you, is that there's a report, there's a set of considerations. It's open to you as members to look at material planning considerations. The important thing that you have to do is couch your comments in those terms. If you were to use the terminology of what you believe to be material planning considerations, I think that's right, and you're looking at issues for the village, about need, about the context, that's fine. It isn't about common sense. These are material planning considerations we're talking about. I think that's what we tell you to do in our training, and that's the important thing to focus on. So that's just a point. We don't need to try and find new language. I think we're bending the rules in that sense, as long as you focus on material planning considerations. So that's just a point just to keep us straight in the way that we think about the balance and the considerations you're putting forward. I've got just a point on need, and I think there is a separate point that we are considering these things in the local plan review, and that might have been a point that Andrew might want to make as well. So all these points about size, the reasons for control, ongoing affordability, are all points that we're looking at anyway. So I think we've captured that through previous conversations. We've got a practice note which was part of a debate, and we're using that in the context of our local plan review. So I think we've got that debate, it's registered, so I'll leave that for members to consider where we go with that. I just got a last point on the point why we use need as an important factor in this as well, because it's a tool, it's a mechanism, it's a benchmark to understand where the exceptions are that work for our policies. It aligns with the district council as housing authorities, so that is a material consideration in itself. And that's an important way that we allow ourselves to think about how this is an exceptional form of development that will address a need in a national park. So that's an important point about how we define need. I accept that, again, that's another point for our review process, but there's a reason for having that. Thank you.
Right, Andrew.
And Chair, you might have been about to address this, but I was going to reassure Dermot and other members that we are already looking at the issue of size in the local plan review group, and that's one of the issues that will be going out to public consultation as we go into the next local plan. It is a I was going to say a complicated issue. It's not a complicated issue in some ways, but we know it's an important issue, and we know it's an issue that is surfacing again and again in circumstances like this. But I come back to what I said initially, and I'm pleased the head of planning has reinforced this. We have a set of policies for a reason, and we have to be guided by them in making our decisions, because we have to make sensible, watertight decisions that adhere to the statutory purposes of the national park and the planning policies that reflect that. I think, judging the mood of the members, we've arrived at the right decision on this occasion. If, Chair, it is approved, I would like officers to enter into dialogue with the applicant about climate change issues around the property. I'm not wedded to anything particular, because I realise that Tissington Village, and that location included, is quite a sensitive area in terms of visual impact, but there will be measures certainly that can be included that will also make the property more sustainable and more affordable going forward. So I'm seeing nods, so I'm sure that will be a positive dialogue.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm assuming what the mood of the meeting is going to be. Would you like to suggest some conditions should we decide to approve it?
Yeah, okay, so if approval is granted, it will be subject to the standard Section 106 agreement to tie occupancy to local need. We'd have the 2-year implementation period, which is standard for a local needs dwelling rather than 3. Adopt the amended plans, remove permitted development rights for extensions and alterations and outbuildings. Hard and soft landscaping scheme to be submitted and agreed. A scheme of climate change mitigation measures to be submitted and agreed. And then there's the highways conditions, which is for a scheme for space for storage of plant and materials, etc. during the construction phase to be submitted. Vehicular access to be formed before any other works commence. Gradient to access to be no more than 1 in 15 for the first 5 metres. Parking to be maintained free of impediment. Bin collection store point to be provided. And then a sample panel of the walling stone and the Staffordshire Blue clay tiles to be agreed. Full details of windows and doors to be submitted and agreed. And then minor design details on...
outside lighting?
Yeah, we could add external lighting, yeah.
Okay. Those are the suggested conditions, members. I'm going to put this to the vote now. All those in favour of Andrew McCloy's motion?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's unanimous, Chair.
That's unanimous. Thank you very much. I can't ask if anyone is against in that circumstance. Thank you very much. Right, are we all... We've got John here. We've not lost any members. No, right, okay. We haven't got any speakers.
Yeah, I'm just...
Joanne, is there any speakers for item 8?
Thank you.
Tim Ward.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, gosh, what a lot of... No, they can't... Right, okay, I see, right. Right, thank you, members. The next item is item 8, which is Greystones High Street Carver. Would you like to introduce it, please, John?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Greystones Bungalow. It's situated at the top of the High Street in Carver Village. That's the steeply rising street which leads from the centre of the village up to the Carver Hassop main road. You can see the application site outlined.
Sorry, John,
in red
can I
there.
interrupt? Would you mind shutting the door, please? Okay, thank you very much. Carry on.
Yes, the application site is outlined in red there. It comprises the bungalow Greystones. The conservation area of Carver comes right up on the eastern boundary of the application site, and there are a number of public footpaths which join the road opposite the top of High Street. Move to the next slide. It comprises a modern bungalow and a garage sat to the back of the site, and as proposed, there are extensions proposed to the rear of the bungalow, extending the gable to the bottom left as you look at that slide, and an extension to the front of the property. Combined, these add a significant amount of volume to the bungalow, and also proposed at the rear is a replacement garage. So a few slides showing you the bungalow in its context. As you can see there, it's a fairly plain bungalow. It's actually constructed from artificial limestone, which is of its time and is well weathered. It has a white rendered panel to the front and some timber grey cladding as well under a concrete hard row roof. As I said, the conservation area is on the right hand side of the property here, so the property is to the right, this traditional house, and further to the right of this slide is all within the conservation area. This is a close-up showing a little bit more detail. And as you look up the drive past the adjoining house, you've got the rear garage, which is a near flat roof, and a carport which will be replaced. It's come to the end of its life. Just a close-up showing the nature of the artificial limestone, which, although wouldn't normally be approved in these days, has weathered well and blends with the local limestone. But that's all in this proposal to be replaced with either natural stone or rendered over. I'll talk more about that when I go through the plans. Just close with the garage. I won't dwell on that too much. This is the back of the bungalow. The ground rises slightly up to the Hassop Road, which is to the right of this slide. And you can see it sitting at the top of the hill of High Street. It is quite visible in the surrounding landscape. And this shows the front elevation and the relationship to the neighbouring property. And as you look down the street, its position in relation to other properties which are within the conservation area. And the character of the adjoining property, which sits just inside the conservation area. So, layout at the moment, conventional rectangular with that flat roof extension to the rear of the bungalow. And you see to the top right of the slide the layout of the garage and carport. As proposed, you have an extension to the rear of the bungalow, which replaces and enlarges that existing flat roof one. There's no concerns about that extension in principle or its location. You've got the replacement garage. Again, there's no concerns about the principle or the details of that garage when we look through that. On this side of the bungalow, the property is being extended, and that extension is being brought forward considerably in front of the building line of the current bungalow. And this is where the concern lies, or the objections, I should say, from officers to this particular proposal. It does make the property somewhat overlong, but more particularly, the extension forward of the building line is contrary to your own design guidance in the alteration and extensions design guide, and in the main design guide, which is pretty clear that these sorts of extensions forward of the building line are not part of the local building tradition. In elevation terms, that's the existing bungalow, and as proposed. So you'll see there is some enhancement in the proposal. The enhancement coming from improved windows to some of the openings, and through the recladding. So that white painted render on this section is replaced with natural limestone walling, and on the gable ends, you can't see too clearly here, the artificial limestone is rendered with a through-tone one-coat render, which the applicant says would be a stone colour. And you'll note that's not a traditional local render, as our design guide says should be a rough cast wet dash render to match the local building tradition. But you see the extension, that's the line of the existing bungalow. So you've got considerable extension, which makes it a little overlong. But in overall terms, it's quite a large plot, so it can take a significant amount of extension. Our concern here rests primarily with this forward projecting extension, which, as it's detailed, we'll see in a moment, isn't acceptable. So looking up the street, so you're looking from within the conservation area, that's the existing gable end, and as proposed. As I say, there's no concerns about the rear gabled extension tucked to the back of the house. That's in line with policy and design guidance. This gable end and this elevation of the rear extension would be rendered, and this forward projection extension, not only does it come forward of the building line contrary to the design guidance, it's also over windowed here, and as a result would be a very prominent and intrusive feature on the building itself, but more importantly on the street scene, and impact adversely on the character of the conservation area. We have given alternative suggestions to the applicant, but he's asked for a decision on this particular plan. Just moving to the rear, that's the rear as existing, as proposed. The whole of the rear would be rendered with this one coat render system. So if members were minded to approve it, we would ask for a condition that that's changed to a traditional render to be in line with the local building tradition. And again, there's some slight improvement to window details on this side, and you can see how the extension on the top side is cut further into the rising ground. And from the top side looking down, and as proposed, so you have the rear extension, again, no concerns there. This gable end would be in stone. It has an inappropriate window, door, French doors in the gable end, which you'll note again, not part of our local tradition, and would be more appropriately sited on the rear. And this is the forward projecting extension, which would be in stone as well on this elevation. The floor plan of the existing garage, as proposed, two-car garage, store to the back, and above, there will be a room above for sort of ancillary storage or whatever other domestic purpose the applicant would wish to use it for. As existing, and then as proposed. You can see there, the roof lights are somewhat dominant. There's no concern about roof lights in principle, but if permission were to be granted, we would need to condition something a little bit smaller and less intrusive in that position. The garage would be constructed in stone, natural limestone with a hard row roof to match the main house and its improvements. And just a couple more elevations of the garage showing its scale and design. That sits back into the site, and although it's much taller than the existing garage, it doesn't have any impact on the neighbours' amenity because it's set well back from their house and private sitting out area. So the key issue in this application really is the front extension, which I've said is both prominent and harmful to the character of the bungalow, the street scene and its setting in the conservation area. I've talked about how our design guide is very clear about front extensions being limited to essentially just small porches in certain locations. And furthermore, in addition to the inappropriate location and the scale of that forward projecting extension, there is the issue of the overglazing, which adds further harm to its appearance. So for those reasons, Chair, the officers have recommended refusal. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you very much. We have one speaker and two half speakers I've got down here. Mr. Tim Ward is the first name I have.
Yeah, I'll be going last.
So that's fine by me. So who's coming first? Are you coming with Jim? No, Mr. Cronin? Okay. You press a button in front of you. Okay. Sorry, I forgot you haven't been here before. Yeah, you press a button in front of you so that the red lights come on. Okay. You should be able to see. That's fine. Thank you very much. And you have 1.5. Well, 1.5 depends
minutes.
How the two of you have sorted it out. But you've 1.5 minutes.
Okay.
And we're quite strict on that.
Okay, thank you. My wife and I were born and raised in Derbyshire. We have a young son called Joshua who attends Kerber Primary School. We love Carver and would like to extend our property to make it our forever home. Our three main design objectives given to our architect were to make our property bigger to enable our family to grow, to enhance the external design to make it more in keeping with the area, and to take advantage of the wonderful views towards Kerber Edge. In late December 2021, I was pleased when Stephen Wigglesworth rang me to say that he'd visited the site and was writing the decision for approval. He quoted, "The area in front of the house was the most logical place to extend due to the bedrock and lie of the land, stating it would be the most cost-effective." He also stated that whilst the project was an unusual shape, overall it would significantly enhance the current dwelling and the surrounding areas. Before I hand over to my architect, I'd like to make the following point regarding the delegated report. Point 1. The length of the dwelling was never raised as a concern prior to receiving the report. Point 2. There are numerous local dwellings within the conservation area with similar glazing. Point 4. Our plot is one of the biggest in High Street. And point 4. With the proposed extensions, it would still be one of the smallest houses on High Street. Whilst our plans would give us the house big enough for our family to grow, I also strongly believe that changing this current bungalow to our proposed bungalow, similarly designed to Amberley, opposite us, would significantly enhance both the dwelling itself, the local area, and the conservation area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, James Mundy.
Hello, committee members. Yeah, just a quick one. Richard's just asked me to talk about design. John's already said that the main issue was the front extension. If you visit the site, which you have, you'll realise that the back of the site extension was never a problem. The rear of it, it's 6 to 8 foot of bedrock. It was suggested we try and extend there, but as the original officer, who'd written it up for an approval, stated that it'd be better doing it at the front. There's a recent project in Kerber that I've had approved where it's pretty much the same. We've extended the side, carried the roof on through with the original bungalow, and we've extended off the front, similar size as well. The only slight issue was the glazing. I explained to the client about the glazing. We did offer some alternatives to the planning officer, but given that they were adamant that we weren't having a front extension, we've left it as submitted to let you make the decision on. But we are willing to change design on that side of things. Overall, given that we're proposing to enhance it massively with changing natural stone, traditional, we were happy to do with traditional render as well, so we can condition that. We don't feel that the planning officer's comments about the proposal being harmful to the conservation area, not of a high standard in terms of material and design. We feel that's going to greatly enhance what's there, given what's currently on site. So we're hoping that given the proposal we put forward, you'd support the application.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I now do have Mr. Ward. And you have the privilege of 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. My name's Tim Ward. I'm the immediate neighbour to the south east of the subject property, so the stone cottage to the right-hand side as you face it.
I'm speaking in support of the application. The officer's report to the committee talks about harmful design and scale in terms of creating long overglazed frontage. It doesn't, however, in my opinion, appear to adequately recognise the existing impact of the current property, context or surrounding precedent. The subject property is the smallest of 3 60s infill bungalows situated at the top of the High Street. The subject property sits well back from High Street and well below the level of the adjoining Hassop Road, where only glimpses of the existing roofscape can be seen by passing cars. There's no pavement on Hassop Road permitting overlooking or viewing. When you turn into the top of High Street, the property is the first bungalow on the left, but your eye is drawn down the High Street and onto the vista of Kerber Edge beyond. The front elevation is angled away from view and the gable is completely shrouded by vegetation, so the property plays no part in the street scene. Coming up, the front elevation is dominated by an existing picture window, an out-of-keeping white rendered facade, typical of its age. The proposals put forward seek to address this and improve the aesthetic. Limestone overcladding and sympathetic replacement window fenestration, a significant and welcome improvement. The 2 similar age bungalows opposite are both dominant and substantial in scale. Significantly, both are built in T-shaped form, and Bramble Haven has a substantial gable protruding towards the High Street, replicated by the proposal. The subject property sits at an angle to the High Street, similar to Holly House Farm below, and therefore disrupts any uniformity or building line. It is orientated to take full advantage of the views towards Baslow, and it's dominated by an existing picture window. Arguably, therefore, the glazing in the proposed extension complements and creates a link to the existing architecture. The glazing sits at right angles to the existing frontage, and as such, the angle substantially reduces and lessens any visual impact as you come up the High Street. Again, there is precedent here with recent approvals in Carver, Edge View, a new extension in the conservation area with full height bifold facing doors directly onto Shippen Lane, and number 13 Lowside Close, adjacent to the conservation area, again with a fully glazed elevation on an extension. Enhancements to the existing elevation treatment, and particularly replacement of the flat roof garage, will soften the harsh impact of the existing dwelling in the landscape, and particularly the long view from Bramley Wood Ridge. I'll just be 2 seconds, lessening and blending its existing impact on the neighbouring conservation area. Finally, I note there have been no letters of objection or concern raised by the Parish Council, but there have been 6 representations supporting the proposals. I would support this application and ask you to please approve it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Owing to the roadworks of Derbyshire County Council, I found myself going through Carver yesterday after we left the site visits, and I had another look at this. And I'm really trying to understand what the real issues are here, having regard to our design guides. It seems to me that the first point that's being made in this report is that, in principle, the forward extension is unacceptable. Am I right there? Is it because there's a forward extension that is unacceptable, or is it because this particular forward extension is unacceptable? Can I get that absolutely clear in my mind?
Yes, the property designed with a flat front, as in line with our local building tradition, and the extension in front of that, of the scale proposed, is contrary to our advice.
Well, is it, when you say of the scale proposed, I mean, obviously, if it was a small porch, you wouldn't be raising an issue. But are you saying that any sort of forward extension of this sort would not be acceptable? Or is it just scale, or is there some other issue?
It's scale in principle, isn't it? The design guide says very clearly that we don't have that tradition, and that they should, you would not normally be looking to approve a forward projecting extension.
Right.
The only exception being small porches, for which there isn't really a great tradition, even for those. So yes, there's a starting point
Right, so when I got home yesterday, I leaped to the design guides. And I'm trying to really follow through what's being said here. There are 2 points that are being said in this report. The first one is the dominance that should be given to the original house, and the importance of making extensions subordinate to that main house. And the second point that it's making is that where you have a... Forgive me, Mr. Cronin, I'm going to have to say 1 or 2 slightly rude things about your house in order to try and get to what the thing is about. But what it very clearly says is that where you have a house that's... they don't like the 1960s and 70s, and this a house that is inappropriate, we should take every opportunity to try and ensure that it is improved. And it gives 1 or 2 examples of how that could be done, like getting rid of the boards on the sides and using the right stone and getting the shape right and everything. But actually, when you go deeper into the design guide, it sends out another message. And the other message is that it actually doesn't like building lines. This isn't a building line, by the way. This is just the front of the house. But it doesn't like building lines. It likes a sense of enclosure. And it actually gives in I think they now call it an annex, but in the original building design guides, it gives examples of houses where you actually do build forward of them in order to create a more interesting shape and a more interesting appearance. And actually the design guide doesn't establish as a principle that you can't build forward. And if you go into the building design guide, there is actually a picture of a development in Thorpe where they advertise the fact that this is the brilliant thing you can do by building forward of a building which is not very good. So there's no principle involved there. If you then go back to the original argument, which is if you've got an original dwelling house, the extension must be subordinate. That works, doesn't it? You've got a double-fronted Derbyshire house, farmhouse with nice, evenly spaced heritage windows and all the rest of it. Of course, you will build subordinate and back from it. But actually, if what you're trying to do is actually create a new development or a new proposal, which is a proposal for enhancement, the idea that you make this bungalow the central attraction in the development must be nonsense, mustn't it? It's a building that we would like not to see. And what is... Forgive me, but it's a building that is inappropriate in the situation. So if you can then put a structure of interest on it and then convert the existing building in a way which is subordinate to that, there's no harm in that, surely. I'm having real difficulties with this. Now, I do say that from my point of view, I see no objection in principle. I can see an advantage in it of extending forward. I do say that I think this particular design, the fenestration proposals and everything else, the roofing details, what do they call those things? No, well, no, they're wooden bits. Soffits or whatever, those things. All those things are not appropriate for the Derbyshire vernacular. I'm sure this can be improved. But I think we're in danger here of saying because of the principle of the forward extension, we're not looking at what can actually be achieved in order to create a considerable benefit on this site. And I think we need to get the forward extension thing out of the way first and then make what's there right. That's my view of it. Members. David Chapman.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to put a simplistic slant on your very eloquent response there. And I'm afraid... common sense, is it? Common sense. I'm afraid, Mr. Cronin, I'm going to have to be a little bit disrespectful of your existing building as well. But it'll be for a good reason. I think anything would enhance this bungalow. I mean, it could have been worse. It could have been built to Davy blocks, but we won't go there. So, I mean, I think the design and the appearance, I'm looking at aesthetics, and if Mr. Ward, who's the next door neighbour, feels that that will be an improvement to his surroundings, then I think we should take that into consideration most definitely. So I'm really I'll move that we support this application.
Andrew?
Yes, there's one or two things that I think broadly I support that. It's one of the things that concern me. First of all, apparently there may have been conflicting advice early on from a planning officer, which is unfortunate. But there's also overtones of discussion for a previous application this morning about growing a family home to support a resident family. But here, we're not looking at new build, or we're not looking at a traditional building in the conservation area. We are looking effectively at a modern bungalow, which is why comments like respecting the local tradition, you can only take that so far. I think there's an approvable development here. Whether we've got exactly the right one, I'm not sure, but I would want to support development on this site, and I think a site visit would have been a good idea just to understand the context. Of the
well,
other
we did one a
buildings
month
around
ago.
it.
We did look at it a month ago.
I beg your pardon, I missed that one. So I'll go with what other members are saying here, but I think we should look favourably on this.
Before anybody else speaks, I'm going to ask the officers, if we're minded to approve something of this sort, do you believe that there are improvements that can be made to the design?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you accept the principle of the forward projecting extension, then yes, as the slide I've got up behind me now, showing that glazed wall effectively. The applicant's agent has already said that they're mindful to put something more appropriate in terms of a better proportioned window in there to overcome that concern, which would address, I think, the point you made earlier, Chair, and make the development more in keeping with the rest of the front elevation. And we've also heard that the applicant or his agent has said they're happy to accept the traditional render, which again brings it more into line. So they'd be the two amendments, and it'd be quite easy to condition a more plain eaves detail and verge detail for the extension, and hopefully the existing house where that's being affected, in line with your earlier comments, Chair. So with those amendments, that's how we
Are you saying that those things could all be achieved by condition?
They could. Yes, we could put a condition requiring an amended scheme to be agreed.
As opposed, for example, to going away and getting it right?
Yes, it'd be much better to, in my view, it'd be much easier to delegate the approval to officers to agree and amend a plan rather than have a condition requiring something. So it'd be much easier to incorporate an amended plan into a decision notice.
Right, okay.
We can do that fairly quickly with the applicant's agent, I would imagine.
Has anybody else got any comments they wish to make? Andrew Hart.
Yeah, Chair, it's a child of its times, is it not?
Yes, quite.
To use a good phrase, I think, there. It's going to be a struggle to get the best out of what is, and I'm sorry, but not a very nice bungalow. It's a child of its times, and it's a struggle to get the right sort of design that's going to uplift it. I think with the improvements that have been suggested in an amended plan regarding rendering and one or two other things and tidying it up, I think it'll be as good as we can possibly hope for. But I'm going to give it support on this because it's also about keeping people within a village, and adapting. Some properties need to be adapted because they are a little out of date and they're not particularly attractive. So let's give the applicant a chance to get this up to a reasonable standard so it can go forth in the first part of the 21st century and hold its head up high for once. I think that's the best thing. Thank you.
I'm going to take the opportunity. I'm going to move from the chair an amendment to the motion, which actually is that this be deferred to enable proper discussions to take place over the design of it. I don't know whether anybody would second that for me. Are you wanting to speak, Ken?
On that point, I'd be willing to defer it, but I think with the rider that we are minded to approve it.
Yeah, absolutely. Ken?
If I may, Chair, I mean, John has to an extent answered the point I was going to make, which was to do with the fenestration. I think and the other point I was going to raise was about the size of that forward protrusion. I would have preferred to see that reduced in the length of protrusion, if you like, up toward the street scene. I acknowledge the point that's been made about bedrock, but where that extension's going to go, there's going to be bedrock anyway that's got to be removed. I would have preferred to see some of it shunted toward the back of the property and the fenestration reduced so that it's much more in keeping with that's currently proposed for the street side. And the reason for that, even though there is, as has been acknowledged, a picture window at one end, that fenestration comes onto the street. What is being proposed at the moment is a much bigger fenestration which looks out into the landscape. And I quite understand why the applicant wants to take in that view, but the reciprocal is also there. The view of that huge area of glazing is going to be visible, particularly early evening at night, when quite reasonably one might wish to sit there and look out at that view, but you're going to get light pollution. So I think that needs to be addressed, and that whether or not it's possible to scale down the extent of that front extension is, I think, the kind of things that need to be considered in discussions that are seemingly going to take place with the applicant.
So we've got a motion on the floor, it's been moved, it's been seconded.
Yes, and I've approved an amendment. Yes, I can. Take the amendment first. We'll take the amendment first, and then if it's lost, then we'll take the main resolution.
You can't,
Yeah.
you can't do that, Patrick. You've got a motion on the floor and your deferral isn't going to change. You're going to have to take that motion first.
Oh, right. Okay. In that, I'm told I can't move an amendment. I'm not sure why I can't move an amendment, but I'm told I can't move an amendment. So if this motion is lost, I will be moving that this be deferred, etc. So the motion is that this be approved in its present form with some conditions as John has outlined. All those in favour? If you're happy for it to be deferred to get the best design we can, yes.
Okay, in which case I'll withdraw my proposal.
In that case, the motion is that this now be deferred with an indication that we are in principle in favour of the layout as it's presented to us to enable officers to negotiate the best design solution out of it. All those in favour? Anyone against? No. That is passed. So there are further negotiations, and if you get into difficulties again, you'll be coming back to us. Okay? Right. Right, I think we've got the lad from Brixton next, haven't we? Below Doveholes Quarry. Who's presenting this?
Rory.
Rory. Hello, Rory. Okay, we've nothing else, so you can start whenever you're ready.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair.
The applicant has submitted this application for the purpose of agreeing a schedule of conditions that will agree the extraction of the permitted limestone reserves located within the National Park. The application has been submitted under the provisions of the Environment Act 1995, specifically sections 96 and paragraph 6 of Schedule 14. Submissions made under the Act seek to agree a modern scheme of conditions to govern the future of the mineral extraction operation. The submission is not a planning application, and a mineral planning authority is not able to issue a refusal, as the right to win and work the mineral has already been established under historic planning consent. The Minerals Planning Team is seeking the Committee's agreement in principle to allow a finalised scheme of conditions to be approved under delegated powers as per the authority's standing orders. The applicant submitted a proposed schedule of conditions along with a thorough environmental statement. The environmental statement considered the full spectrum of possible environmental impacts that could be associated with the extraction of the mineral and the subsequent restoration of the site. The assessments made within that environmental statement have been subject to the appropriate statutory consultation, and, where necessary, new or amended conditions have been provisionally agreed with the operator. The critical purpose of the ROMP process is to agree a modern schedule of conditions to govern the extraction operation and the restoration of the site. The premise of the development, i.e. the extraction of 33 million tonnes of limestone from within the National Park, has already been granted through the 1950s permission. The legislation is clear that in the determination of this application, the authority cannot act in such a way as to restrict the working rights of the operator. In practical terms, this means conditions cannot limit or control the following issues: the size of the extraction area, the depth of the extraction, the height of any deposited mineral waste, the rate at which the mineral can be extracted, the rate at which the mineral waste can be deposited, the total quantity of mineral to be worked, and the period of time the operation is allowed to continue. Any restriction of these working rights would leave the authority liable for compensation, which in this instance would be a significant sum. Through the consultation process and subsequent negotiations, a provisional schedule of conditions has been expanded to cover the following matters: the phasing of the extraction and restoration of the site, noise, dust and vibration limits for different stages of the operation, ecological management and mitigation across the site, archaeological investigations, protection of the hydrological environment, biodiversity net gains, and the end date for the extraction operation and the final restoration to be completed. The conditions detailed in the committee report are considered to be at an advanced stage, but the wording will be subject to some minor changes to ensure the conditions are enforceable, accurate, and have suitable trigger mechanisms. The applicant will be asked to formally submit the final agreed schedule of conditions as part of their application before the ROMP consent is issued. This process would be in accordance with the planning practice guidance to ensure that the Minerals Planning Authority is not open to potential compensation claims. The application site is 8.3 hectares of agricultural land on gradually sloping hillside, situated immediately northeast of the existing Below Dove Holes quarry. The site will be worked in a series of phases that will see the quarry gradually deepened, but each of these phases will be tied into a programme of progressive restoration. This approach of phase restoration will help mitigate the visual and landscape impact of the extraction process. The final restoration master plan ties in with the approved plan in the Derbyshire County Council area of the existing quarry. Ultimately, the main quarry void will be flooded to create a lake feature, with the benches landscaped and planted to help blend the site into the wider landscape. With regard to the actual extraction operation, the proposed conditions are considered to reflect modern environmental standards and best practice guidance, whilst being careful to not impose any restrictions on the operator's working rights. There are several residential properties that are located within reasonably close proximity of the extraction site. These properties have been identified as sensitive receptors through the environmental assessment process. Conditions relating to environmental pollutants, such as dust, noise, or vibration, have all defined limits and require measurements to be taken at these identified sensitive receptors. The relevant conditions have a targeted mitigation strategy built in, so the operation minimises the emission of these environmental pollutants. Where the limits are broken, the authority will have the power to ensure the operator remediates the issue. Regular site visits by officers and the annual submission of dust, noise and vibration surveys will ensure the authority is able to closely monitor the progress of the extraction, meaning decisive action can be taken to protect the amenity and well-being of nearby residents as and when appropriate. It is worth noting that the Minerals team have been able to secure an agreement with the applicant to include a condition requiring a biodiversity net gain of 17%, which is the figure the authority's ecological officer has agreed the restoration scheme will deliver. We have been able to secure this agreement despite the biodiversity net gain legislation, which requires a minimum 10% uplift, not yet being in place. This is a testament to the applicant's commitment to operating in a sustainable and environmentally responsible manner. The conditions relating to the phasing of the operation mean that the authority's ecological officers will be able to give an assessment on the progress and quality of the restoration throughout the operational life of the quarry. Ultimately, this means that the authority can monitor the restoration process to ensure the 17% biodiversity net gain is reached by the time the site is fully restored. A subsequent aftercare period will be used to ensure that the restored environment takes effectively and that the authority will have a lever to require the operator to undertake any maintenance or replacement of any vegetation that fails to take. Ultimately, the schedule of conditions that has been drafted is considered to offer a thorough protection of wildlife, local residents and the landscape, whilst working within the framework of the Environment Act and not restricting the operator's working rights. With that in mind, the officer's recommendation is that the committee move to grant delegated powers to the Minerals Planning Team to secure a final schedule of conditions.
Thank you very much, Rory. I've been through it in a fair amount of detail. Actually, I've made one or two suggestions to officers because there are a few dates and things missing. But has any other members got any thoughts or comments on it? Let's start off with Andrew McCloy.
Rory, thank you. Very clear and informative paper of a subject potentially quite complicated for members, so thank you. I'm really pleased to see the 17% BNG level. That's a real plus for us, so big tick there. A couple of questions. Under the consultations, this is paragraph 36, environmental health. No objections, but highlighted the fact that the background levels of noise and the levels of noise generated when the site was operating were outside of the PPG guidance range. What does that mean?
Thank you, yes. Yes, so the planning practice guidance does set guidelines for noise, dust and vibration and various other environmental pollutants. The issue that we had specifically with the noise limits is that part of the existing quarry that sits within Derbyshire County Council have these noise limits baked in. So these sensitive receptors are located within the national park, but are also quite close to the area of the quarry that operates inside Derbyshire County Council. So we're working within a framework where we have to fit in with the previously agreed noise limits from the existing permission in Derbyshire County Council. One of the issues I understand from speaking to the officer who dealt with it at DCC is that the cement operating plant has a series of mechanisms and fans, which means that unfortunately they're unable to comply with those noise limits which relate specifically to mineral extraction. Obviously, a planning decision has been made previously by DCC that this was acceptable in this case, and so really we didn't have any, room to work and bring that down, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And then my second question sort of is related to just that, the fact that this is a site, mostly Derbyshire County Council outside the national boundary. So in your conclusion, paragraph 88, you say that the conditions that we're being asked to endorse closely mirror those that DCC put on. Closely mirror. How do they not mirror entirely? What areas of difference are there, or is it just very subtle?
Yeah, I think it will be, very, very minor tweaks and wordings potentially in line. This will be a more modern permission than the DCC application. In truth, the two permissions will be compliant. They will operate together, but there may be very slight changes in the wording. It's not a mirror image. But ultimately they are compatible. We have made sure that the wording of the conditions is such.
If it was a mirror image, it would be exactly the opposite, wouldn't it?
Sure.
David Chapman.
Thanks, Chair. Pedant. Thanks, Rory. That was a great presentation. Just a couple of questions, and I'll ask the same question that was asked at the National Plan Advisory Group. What metrics do you use to measure 17% biodiversity net gain? That's the first question.
Sure. So there are the ecological officers break them down into habitat units. So the assessment that's taken place has been an assessment of the application site. At the moment, it is essentially semi-improved agricultural land with some calcareous grassland. The ecological officers and the respective ecological consultants have a government set calculator which helps them calculate the number of habitat units that are there at the moment, which in turn, so that gives us a baseline of understanding of the biodiversity value of the site at the moment. And then those same units is the way that we measure the proposed restoration scheme. So we have a meaningful way of measuring that.
Okay. The second question is, will we be establishing a restoration bond with CEMEX? Obviously, the purpose of something like that is if CEMEX went spectacularly kaput before the restoration, have we got any means of ensuring against that?
Sure. I'm not sure whether there would be a restoration bond required in this instance. CEMEX are a practical operator.
If I may, Chair.
Apologies.
I mean, potentially, we could investigate entering into a restoration bond with the operator, if needs be, and that gave more security. But in this instance, I wouldn't expect it to be necessary. This is CEMEX's biggest site in the UK. They're a responsible operator. We have mechanisms to enforce and ensure the restoration of the site under the conditions as it is. But if members want more security, it's something we could consider. Thanks, Chair.
Can I just come back on that? Yeah, I would like to see something like that maybe being investigated, Tom.
Yeah, thanks, David. We'll look into it with the operator. I think, the recommendation we would put forward is, the principle of agreeing the conditions. So it's something we can discuss with the operator after this meeting and report back perhaps to the Chair. To feedback to committee if you're agreeable with that, Chair.
Thank you. Yes. Is that okay with you? Okay. Mike Chaplin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that. This very comprehensive report. There's a lot of very large amount of recommendations in there, but I imagine that, I believe that is as it should be, and I support David's proposal for the bond to be investigated. so that we can make sure that the land is restored after all the material has been dug out. I was a bit concerned about what you were saying in response to Andrew's question about the noise levels and how that can be controlled or can't be controlled because the parameters have already been set by Derbyshire County Council. I just wondered how many properties there are within the Peak District National Park that would be affected by the noise.
Sure, I understand that it's 2 properties within the boundary that are affected by the noise from the cement plant. So further down from the application site to the south, east of the application site, within the national park boundary, the properties are much closer to the cement plant, which is governed by a separate application, a separate permission, and also a separate set of guidelines in the planning practice guidance. So it's working within that pre-established framework that we are dealing with.
Are those residents aware that the noise levels can't be controlled?
My understanding is yes. We obviously went through the full publicity of the application, received no representations from local residents. The parish councils in the area offered no objection. I think there is very much an understanding that this is an operational site, a very large operational site, and there is unfortunately a level of environmental impact that goes along with that, but that they are taking all practical steps to minimise that.
Oh, thank you for that. I just have one more thing. It was on recommendation 20 with all those invasive plants.
Sure.
Yeah, page 69. I didn't see Japanese knotweed,
I
unless
raised
it's
the same
hiding
question.
under a different name.
Sure. Quite possibly. Obviously, the schedule of conditions has been subject to a process of review with our ecological officers here in the team. It wasn't flagged up. There might be a different name for it, but I will obviously double check with them and ensure that it's a comprehensive list to make sure that those noxious weeds are kept off site.
And New Zealand duckweed was the other one.
Sure.
Okay. Well, I'll move this from the... Sorry?
Can we just have it down to a named officer rather than just officers? So you get granting delegated authority to which officer?
It's
head of planning?
Head of planning, isn't
Yeah.
it?
It doesn't say it, so yeah, okay. Thank you. So you delegated to the head of planning.
Right. Well, on that basis, I'm moving that this be approved. Anyone? Right. All those in favour? Anyone against? No, that's unanimous. Right.
Can I request a comfort break, Chair?
Yes. Look, I'm open to suggestions here. We're going to try and deal with this next batch as quickly as we can. If we only have a quick 5 minutes at the most, hopefully we'll get them over by about 1:15. Is that all right? I think was fairly straightforward what we've got to deal with now. Right, we're reconvening. We've lost Councillor Andrew Hart over the interval, and we're going to come on to a number of planning applications for machines at various national park car parks. I'm hoping we're going to be able to deal with it fairly quickly. We are sadly going to need a separate introduction to each report, but I've asked, first of all, that Mark sets the scene so that we don't have to do it every single time. But each report will be accompanied by some pictures and a map, which will have to be talked to, but please keep it as short as you can. Okay, agenda item 10. This is the Fryden car park.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, I'll try and keep this as brief as I can. I'll give you an overview at the start here, which is equally relevant to each of them, so that we don't have to repeat that each time. So there's 7 applications here. This is the first tranche of applications that will come forward. There are more going through the pipeline at the moment as the authority looks to start charging for parking in its car parks. The charging itself, of course, is not a planning matter or consideration and is separate to a subject to a different decision of the authority. In order to facilitate that parking, though, these applications are for the car parking meters that you can see in the photograph there. There's also a need for accompanying signage, which is alongside, but please be aware that that is subject to a separate consent regime, so that would need to be applied for under the advertisement consent regulations, not through the planning application that you see before you. Nevertheless, it is facilitated or necessitated rather by the parking meter. So it's reasonable to take some account of the fact that in approving the parking meters, the signage is likely to follow.
So would that come to us?
As an authority application, if those signs were of such a size that they require consent and they don't benefit from deemed consent, then yes, they would. And I don't know the answer to that at the moment. I don't know if those are of such a size that they would have.
I'll deal with that at the end of the...
Okay, that's fine. So, sorry, I've lost my thread a little. In terms of the charging regime that's being proposed, as I say, that's a separate decision for the authority. However, it's still reasonable for us to give some consideration to the potential impacts that the introduction of parking charges, in this case, the introduction of the parking meters, would have on displacing any parking onto the roads. Across each of the applications, the applicant, the authority in this case, has said that they intend to monitor the use of the car parks and the charging regime and take action as needed going forward. There's 4 applications from the south area here, 2 of which have no representations, 2 of which have a representation, which I will come to as we go through, but that largely relates to that very issue, concern about parking being displaced out of the car parks because people don't want to pay the charges. So I think that's, as an overview of all of the applications, I think that's all I need to introduce really, and I'll now go through them in order. So if I go back to this slide. So this is the Fryden car park. It's located to the south side of the High Peak Trail, which you can see running sort of diagonally. Is my mouse working? Yeah. The trail is running along here with the road running the opposite angle along that direction. It's approximately 750 metres northeast of Newhaven Junction with the A515, and the site currently comprises a hard surface car park, and it's accessed off the southeast side of the road, opposite one of the access to the refractories just south of the bridge. So you can see this is the access down here. There's a closer view of the car park and the position that you can see here of the proposed parking meter. You can see there's this is described as P&D sign, pay and display sign, with 2 crosses. You'll see that on several of the plans. Those aren't subject to this application either. Those would be advertisements again, so they would be subject to control under different regulation. They are fairly small, and there was a photo, but it seems to have disappeared. They are very low mounted on a sort of a wooden stump almost, signs just to remind people to park and to thank people for parking. But they're not subject to this application. So what we're looking at here is literally the area there within the car park where the signage is proposed. Sorry, not the signage, the meter is proposed.
We don't want them back again.
And this is just showing the example at Elsop station that's already been introduced, so you can see what the meter would look like. Oh, there we go, we have got them. So that's the 2 signs to which I referred. There's a plan of the metre itself. So it's 1.7 metres tall by about 30 centimetres wide. At the narrowest point at the base and about 47 centimetres wide at the top. And this is the access looking into the car park. So the road that it joins is at the bottom here, runs up into the car park. You see some vehicles parked up at the top there. And this is looking back towards the entrance. So the entrance goes off down there, and the signage is proposed up at this end of the car park here. And this is looking back from the other side. So again, this is the access running up into the car park, which is over here, and the signage would be to this side here. And there's a view along the trail. The signage would be positioned at the far end as you look at this. And this is looking back the other way along the trail, so the signage would be somewhere around here. And it's a view from the road to show that really it's not going to be visible from that direction at all. So the key issues from a planning point of view here are the visual impacts of the signs, of the metre, sorry. In the context of the existing car parks, they're a relatively modest structure, they're narrow, and there is screening around the site in the form of tree planting here. So we have no concerns on those grounds. And there's no representations on this particular application, and it's recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
I'm going to move that from the Chair. Has that seconded it? Has anyone got any comments to make?
Chair, I use this car park quite a lot, and when it gets really, the hard stand gets really busy, people do park on the grass verge on the approach drive. Will it be clear to people that that's part of the chargeable car park? Because you know what's going to happen when you've got a long grassy drive. People think they're exempt because they're not on the hard stand. I mean, will there be signage?
I don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid. And the signage is proposed in the car park, as you could see on the plans there, but there was nothing to suggest that it would advise that payment is required on those verges at the moment. But that's perhaps something that could be, any signage like that would be subject to a separate application, so it could be something we could take up with the property team.
Well, could you take up Andrew McCloy's question with those who...
I will.
Yeah, please. Right. Any other comments? All those in favour? It's been proposed and seconded. Anyone against? No, that's carried. Thank you. The next application is Muldridge Lane Pike Hall.
Thank you, Chair. So the application proposals are the same in terms of the it's for the same amount of signage and metre. And this time the application site is located in open countryside, approximately 950 metres south of Pike Hall. And again, it's a hard surface area of car park, and it's positioned between Muldridge Lane and to the south of the trail. And again, you can see the trail running across and actually through the northern edge of the car park in this instance. And there's a closer up view. And in this case, the signage would be positioned at this side of the site here. So this is the road running past the edge, and this is the trail coming through the site there. And so that's the view of the car. If I just go back, sorry, the car park entrance, I should point out, is down there. So this is a view looking past the entrance. So the signage is well beyond these trees at the back of the car park in that view. And this is the view within the car park. So the signage gets positioned up at this end here. There's a closer view of that. I think actually this photo is a little bit to the right. The signage is over here rather than here. And looking back from the road from the east, as it sort of bends up the eastern edge of the site, the signage would be behind that wall. And the same angle, but from a bit further back, so you're actually on the trail at this point, looking towards the car park. And right from the other end of the trail, the signage would be back here. And again, it's the same metre.
If I may say so, I think the same question arises. It's a question that must be put to our car parking people on every site, I think, about what there is to stop people parking on the grass verges and things.
Yeah, within the car park itself, yeah, that's fine. This application has received 3 representations, 2 general comments, 1 objection. One of those relates to introducing charging specifically in terms of that reducing access to the countryside due to the additional costs being prohibitive to people visiting, and the others relating to the visual impacts of the installation itself. and to the issue I discussed previously about pushing parking onto the road. In terms of the visual impacts, we're satisfied that the visual impacts here will again be low, given the size and appearance of the metre. And the other matters are, as I discussed at the start of the items. So it's recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
I'll move that for approval. Seconded. Anyone want to comment? All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. The next one I have is Moore Lane Car Park, Yulegrave.
Thank you, Chair. So this same development type again, the application site here being located in the countryside, approximately 1.4 kilometres to the northwest of Yulegrave. The site once again comprises a hard surfaced area off the south of Moore Lane, and it's roughly 150 metres east of the junction with Longrake, with the boundary of the car park being delineated by a dry stone wall on this occasion. On the eastern side of the car park, probably see better on the next photo, there is a right of way running north to south. And you can see here, pane display machine would be positioned near to the car park entrance. And it's the same meter again. So this is the position of the meter in this case, behind the dry stone wall, next to the site entrance. Looking back across, so it would be positioned in this area here. Closer view of that, and another view from outside of the site. So that, again, the meter is on that side of the entrance. There's perhaps a few more here than you might have needed.
Thank you very much.
So there's a single representation here again, which relates predominantly to concern about parking being pushed onto the road, which is, as I stated previously, the authority's position is that will be kept under review. We have no concerns about the wider landscape or visual impacts, and it's recommended for approval again. Thank you, Chair.
Right, I'll move that from the Chair. Anyone who wants to second it? Yes. Has anybody got any comments? Okay. Sorry, I had that proposed and seconded. I haven't yet taken a vote on it. Anybody else want to comment on it? No? All those in favour? What? Please.
Well, that raises question. I mean, in the previous application, there was a threat to vandalise, or vandalisation was the word that was used in that one. In the event that we have to withdraw these devices, what would we do with them? Can we get our money back?
That's a question which you should have asked at the last authority meeting, if I may say so. Because the point was made at the last authority meeting that this will encourage people to park on the road instead of in car parks. I think I was the one that made it. So that is a question for another day. Dermot.
Maybe I've missed it, but did we enter into any sort of debate or consultation with the Highways Department about the issues that are going to be generated by all these people that are going to be parking on the roads? Maybe there should have been a joint venture here where they could possibly be encouraged to introduce, double yellow lines, whatever, to try and stop people parking in areas they shouldn't.
This is actually in conjunction with Derbyshire County Council. Derbyshire County Council is making the traffic regulation order in relation to the introduction of the car park charges. So they carried out a consultation in the Derbyshire area at the same time we did. So they've considered, I understand, these points separately at the county.
Okay, right. Third effort. We've had it proposed and seconded. All those in favour? Anyone against? No. That's now carried. I think the next one I have is this is another Minninglow one, isn't it?
Chair,
Yes.
if it's okay with you, we'll do the last south area one, which is Milldale, and then...
Tell me what number that is.
It's,
Milldale,
it's number,
it's come
six,
up.
number 16.
So it's on page 135.
Five.
So this one is Milldale Car Park, Milldale on the River Dove.
Thanks, Chair. So the development type is the same again. The application site is located in the wooded valley of Hopedale Hollow at Milldale. It's roughly 850 metres to the south of Alstonfield Village. The site comprises, in this case, a hard surface parking area off each side of the lane. So to the north side, the car park is bounded by dry stone walling, and to the south, it's effectively lay-by parking. So there's a closer view of the site. So you can see the site entrance to the area that is enclosed by the walling there. This is the lay-by area to the south, and this is the proposed position for the pay and display machine. And there you go, you can see that more clearly here. So the enclosed area is obviously to the left with the lay-by parking to the right. Another view looking back in the opposite direction. Within the car park on the northern side of the road. And again. And the meter. And so the considerations here are the same. The Parish Council have objected on this occasion on the basis that the proposals would encourage verge parking, resulting in traffic congestion, a risk that the machine won't have a signal in order to be able to take contactless payments, and the risk of theft or vandalism of the machine given the rural location. In terms of the matter of the signal, that's something that officers raised with the applicant, and we're advised that each of the areas has been checked to ensure it will have a signal and be able to operate. In terms of the visual impacts here, we're satisfied that those are acceptable, and the matter of verge parking is, as I advised on the previous applications, that the authority will keep that under review. The application is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
I'll move it from the chair. Does somebody second it?
Can I just double check? The property team have checked that there is a mobile signal with all the providers, because that's an issue in this location, which I know very well. It's deep in an enclosed valley. It's fine for pay and display parking location-wise, but I can't imagine you get much of a signal.
I've received a nod from the far end of the room to say we have.
Yes, the company who provides the machines have been out with some sort of device to test that. There are some machines that need a booster unit to achieve the required signal, but they assure us that they all work. I've only just come in.
With that reassurance.
I've moved it, but I haven't had a seconder yet. Seconded. Right. Anyone else wish to comment? All those in favour? All those? No one against? That's unanimous. And so we're now going backwards to
Item 13.
Which one?
Item 13, page 111.
111. I'm told page 111. We're told. Really? There we are. Okay. Burbage Ringing Low Car Park. Right. We're at Upper Burbage Car Park, Ringing Low Road, Stanage.
Yes, this lies in the open moorland, a little bit of dip in the open moorland between Hathersage and Ringing Low. Exactly the same proposed meter that Mark described in the earlier applications. It's sited on the eastern side of the car park, next to the entrance into where the footpath network leads from the car park. It will be clearly visible. You'll see in the ensuing slides. It's on the right-hand side here. There's no landscaping or tree planting or other features in this car park. It's quite open. But where it's sited, it's logical, and its dark colour will mitigate its visual impact. And on that basis, Chair, we considered that within this location, the meter was acceptable. In terms of overspill parking, you've got a solid white line on the side of these roads here. There is verge parking in the wider landscape, and as before, there's a proportionate response from the authorities team to monitor overspill and try and address it accordingly.
Two things. First of all, I'm advised it's just after 1 o'clock, so can we resolve to carry on after 1 o'clock? Two, I will move this for approval. In saying that, something's just occurred to me, actually. It's looking at that very first photograph we had from Mark, which is the advertisement sign that was advertising these things. I do hope we'll take care in the colour scheme of that, because those lime green colourings and things are not particularly helpful in some of these environments we're looking at. It needs to be something fairly sober and subdued rather than bright and livid, like that lime green suggestion was.
Yes, Chair, just for information, if they don't need consent, i.e. they're small, and most of them will be, they'll benefit from deemed consent. It's up to the applicant to choose whatever colour they so wish.
Well, can't we send the message back to the applicant?
Yeah,
certainly. We would want something sober and suitable for the environment.
We can advise, certainly.
Thank you. Right, I've moved this for approval.
Sorry, can I just double check? We've resolved the issue with the strategic energy pipeline, have we?
We have, yes. The meter cabinet was located on the western side of the car park, which was within the easement. Now it's been relocated to the eastern side. It's outside of that easement, and we expect that the consultation would be fine with them. I should have added, so you're right to point that out, that we need to make sure that they don't come back with an objection. But being outside, we clearly feel that we've resolved that objection.
And at the risk of stating the obvious as well, and we've had this with car parks, haven't we, on the Stanish North Lees estate, this is a really sensitive location up on the natural zone, very open landscape, and any displacement and verge parking will have to be monitored very carefully, to the extent that if a problem persists, we will have to be careful that we have some considered discussion with the Highways Authority about options, because yellow lines throughout the whole of that road network is not an option. So just a word of warning that that location in particular is really sensitive.
Okay, David?
Yeah, just a point applicable to all these applications. We're increasing the amount of the area of car park, or the number of car parks that need policing. Have we made an arrangement with our partners to provide extra wardens, or not listening anymore? Sorry, I was just saying.
Well, again, I think that's a question you can put at the back of the room.
Yeah, we're part of an enforcement partnership. Excuse me.
Actually,
they do all the Derbyshire car parks. They've got lots of resource. That's an issue.
Thanks.
Actually, if there are any more questions, could you come and sit there? Because it should go into the microphone, if you see what I mean, because people are listening. Well, people may or may not be listening. Right, the Barber booth. Oh.
Chair, if I could just come back, just following up a point that Andrew made about the clearing the oil pipeline. Whilst we believe we've absolutely cleared that objection, we should make sure that any resolution is subject to no contrary view. We need to just make sure we have their response back. I don't believe we've received that back yet, even though we're well outside the easement. So we should just make sure the resolution is subject to no contrary view from that. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Right, that has been proposed and seconded. All those in favour? Anyone against? That is unanimous. The next one I have is Barber Booth in Edale.
Yes, this one is sited well to the west of Barber Booth. It's a small car park surrounded by woodlands, which screens the site very well. It's off a single track road, which minimises the possibility of the immediate overspill parking, although there are some opportunities closer to Barber Booth for overspill parking. The meter's logically sited in the eastern side against banking and seen against a backdrop of trees. That's looking the the other direction of the car park. And looking back towards actually, the meter would be in this area here against this banking on that side of the car park facing towards Barbara Booth. So in that location, for the same reasons as others, we consider the landscape impact to be acceptable and the other mechanisms to mitigate any adverse effects proportionate, and recommend approval, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
This has caused an absolute furore on the Edale Community Village website.
It doesn't surprise me one tiny little jot.
Chair, at the same time, Edale Parish Council unanimously support it. So, you know, we've got to take on board the formal representation. Can I put a plea in while I've got the microphone on to property in particular, that this may be an opportunity, not just this car park, but all of them, to look at the signage in the whole in the car park. I noticed that last photo, there were already 2 or 3 signs, an interpretation board there. If we have opportunities to tidy up and rationalise some of the notices and signage, that'd be really good.
Thank you very much. I will now move that from the chair. Is that seconded? Seconded. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's unanimous. I'm now moving on to Hook's car park. Sorry, Hook's car park.
Yes,
in Hathersage.
Yes, this one lies below the iconic Stanage Edge and is a very popular car park. Again, the meter being proposed. We do have an objection to this particular meter from the parish council, concerned obviously that it will result in overspill parking, which does already occur in this area at busy periods. I should also point out that this car park sits in the below the edge and is actually within the natural zone and within the special protection area and the special area of conservation. Although being a car park, it doesn't exhibit any of those features. It's surfaced, very formal, and has been in that situation for a considerable period of time. So on that basis, Chair, officers, and I would advise members, you don't need to give much or indeed very little weight to the fact that it sits within those designated areas, because there's no harm to the actual designated sites. In this case, again, this is probably one of the car parks where the applicant will need to monitor carefully the impact of overspill and perhaps work hardest to offset people's behaviour. But in terms of siting, it's been relocated to the southeastern side where there's already some street furniture. So it'd be sited here next to this black car where you've got bicycle hoops, existing signage, and just outside of shot, roads, Derbyshire County Council's road signage. So in that location, although it would be clearly visible, it's on balance to be. Oh yes, it's picking up. Yeah, picking up in the recommendation. The second point made by the parish council that they were concerned that sitting on a concrete base, if that concrete base was proud of the ground, it would be an intrusive feature in itself. So, although I'm sure the team would lay it carefully so that was mitigated, nevertheless, in this particular case, being the very sensitive location it is, we've added that extra condition just to ensure the base has been laid and the ground and the grass is mounded around it so that it's more seamless than might otherwise be the case. So with that, Chair, we've recommended approval.
And I think in that location, particularly, the issue of signage, size, shape, colour, is very sensitive. So we need to be careful about that.
I think also, Chair, if I may, given that the location is now at one end of the car park, which must be 100 metres long, I think there's an issue about people at the far end claiming they didn't know it was a pay and display kind of thing. So it's just, I think there needs to be some signage at the far end somehow to make sure that people are aware.
Well, actually, can I just ask that then? Why does it have to be at one end? Why can't it be in the middle where it's more convenient?
Well, you can make the same claim if it's in the middle. It's so long that if you were at parts at the other end, you wouldn't see it either. So the signage would identify that. But if it was sited in the middle, when the car park is in limited use, it would stick out like a sore thumb in views of the iconic edge.
But actually what will infuriate the customers is just simply having to walk, if it is 100 yards long, is still having to walk 200 yards there and back to go and pay. It's a matter of convenience. Can you help us on this?
The footpath, can I just add, Chair, to help here? The footpath entrance into the moorland where everybody walks is near the top end. So most people at the bottom end will be walking back up the car park to go up the footpath up the edge.
Oh, right, okay.
So I think it's reasonable, and we've prioritised landscape over convenience,
Right,
which is
that
the
makes
important
sense.
judgment.
That makes sense. Right, so on that basis, I will move that the machine at Hook's car park will be approved. All those, is that seconded, first of all? Yes, and then all those in favour? Anyone against? No, that's carried unanimously. We've dealt with Milldale. We're now on to the Head of Law report. Anyone wish to comment on this?
Can I just ask one question?
Of course.
Thornbridge, where are we?
Waiting for the decision.
Yeah, still waiting.
Is there any reason why?
No, haven't heard.
It was a 3-week inquiry, and the inspector's going to have to do an awful lot of reading and writing. It will take her time, one way or another. Right. I would imagine so. Is the Head of Law report noted? It is. Good. All those in favour?
Thank you.
And that's 1:15. Nearly got there. Nearly got there. Thank you all for your attendance, and we'll see you sometime towards the end of April, but I can't remember the date.